across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. I'm Peter Cardwell here on Talk Drive, just back from Staffordshire, where I've been interviewing the Prime Minister. We'll watch that at 5 o'clock. He talked to me about net zero. He talked to me about the rape gangs. I pressed him on what he's actually doing to sort the problem even before this inquiry starts. I also asked him about Iran, a very, very big issue today. We're going to get into all of that with Jack Elsom, who is the Sun's political editor. He's live in the studio in just a minute. Later on in the programme, we'll talk about the benefits bill, the ECHR eroding public trust because it protects criminals, and that's Labour saying that, and what Trump is saying and doing, or indeed not doing, when it comes to Iran. On that note, many British people, including my friend Lee, former MP himself, are stranded in Israel. How will they get out? Is the government doing the right thing? David Lammy has been severely criticised for all of that. We'll get reaction to what Sir Keir Starmer has been saying from Jim Gamble, a former senior police officer who specialises in child protection. He used to be one of the most senior child protection police officers in the country. He will react to what the Prime Minister is saying on gangs. We'll get your reaction too, of course. That's the main thing about this programme. Forget the Prime Minister. You're more important to me anyway of this programme. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or indeed give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss, and that Prime Minister interview all coming up before 7 o'clock here on Talk. Well, thank you so much for your company this afternoon. As I say, I'm just back from Staffordshire. The interview is being put into our system as we speak, and we will watch it at 5 o'clock. That's the Prime Minister. He was up in Staffordshire talking to a family about a cost of living announcement, more money off energy bills, £150 that many people will benefit from. But of course, there are many other things I wanted to press him on, and we'll watch all of that very shortly. In the meantime, let's talk to Jack Elsom, political editor of The Sun. Jack, I haven't actually interviewed you since you've been promoted to the top job, so many congratulations.
Thank you very much, Peter.
It's great to have you in the studio. Big day politically. Are we on the brink of World War III?
Well, it's certainly heading towards some kind of crunch, I think. And Donald Trump, at the moment, doesn't seem to be conveying exactly what he's going to be doing. He says in his own mind he's not sure whether he's going to be contributing to the Israeli effort in terms of their bombing campaign on Iran. I think he said yesterday, I might do it, I might not. And what this really relates to is whether the US are going to supply Israel with the capacity to use their bunker-busting bombers, which would essentially be able to penetrate deep into the ground and strike Iran's nuclear facility. Now, Trump seems to be keeping the world on edge. The world is currently holding its breath about whether the US will get involved. There's been an escalating war of words between Ayatollah.
He's rubbished the Wall Street Journal as well in terms of saying that he's definitely going to go forward with this plan. He says he's not. They don't know what he's thinking. No one knows what he's thinking. Does he know what he's thinking?
I don't know, because he does seem incredibly erratic. And from a UK perspective, I've been chatting to senior people in government today, and it just, I don't think it's incredibly hard to really appreciate just what they're dealing with here, because the norms of usual diplomacy and channels have completely gone out the window. And usually you have an idea about how the US will respond, but with the Trump administration, that's not true whatsoever.
He's not a linear
and he takes
politician.
to his truth social, and he says, you're going to do one thing, do that. But I think what's becoming clear now is that it is definitely an option on the table for Donald Trump to launch bombing campaigns on Iran. It is also increasingly clear, I think, that Sir Keir Starmer will be incredibly uncomfortable when it comes to supporting that. He is talking the language of de-escalation. I was at Number 10 lobby briefing earlier with the Prime Minister's spokesman, constantly journalists asking questions, would Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, support President Trump, who, let's remember, has been very supportive of Donald Trump since he came in. They clearly have struck up some sort of rapport. Would he support it? and he wouldn't say. He kept saying, we want to see de-escalation. So it does seem there's a bit of a schism in the transatlantic alliance.
I don't think they're going to get it. It was interesting when I asked the Prime Minister about this earlier. In Staffordshire, he was saying, well, you know, it's a very fast-moving situation. We keep hearing that sort of language. It's like, well, yes, it is, and I'm not sure they know exactly what's going to happen. I don't think anybody does necessarily. Let's talk a bit more about domestic politics, because the benefits bill is on course to rise by £18 billion a year without reform, equivalent to more than the entire police budget. What's going on here?
It's absolutely shocking. So Labour have put forward a package of cuts. They did it a few months ago, and yesterday we got the impact assessment. It's essentially £5 billion worth of cuts a year to the benefits bill. Now, to put that in perspective, my colleague Martina Bed has written a fantastic piece in The Sun today. Sickness and disability benefits alone by 2030 is going to balloon to £100 billion a year. So £5 billion is really a drop in the ocean. And yes, it's going to rise by £18 billion every year and basically level out at about £100 billion over the next 5 years. And that is an extraordinary number. That is more than the entire GDP of Slovakia that we are just spending on sickness benefits alone. And that's before you even scratch the surface of benefits for the jobless, the elderly. It's an incredible albatross around the country's neck. It is crippling the economy. £5 billion you might not think is enough to really sort of reverse that trend, but for some Labour MPs it really is. A lot of Labour MPs getting incredibly squeamish about this. We understand about 100 of them, Keir Starmer's backbenchers, are lining up to vote against this package of cuts in the next few weeks when it comes back to the House of Commons. And I think that it's going to be incredibly difficult, because before the election, obviously the ballooning welfare state was an issue which both parties talked about. Labour made the point that they would be better, Labour insiders, they'll be better placed to be able to cut the benefits bill than the Tories, because they wouldn't be exposed to the same accusations the Tories are. Oh, the nasty old Conservatives, of course they want to punish the poorest. Actually, Labour seem to be really boxed in by this one, because even though Keir Starmer has a massive majority, if you have 100 Labour MPs voting against it, that's enough to blunt it.
And it's not just the usual suspects, Jack, is it, either? Because I heard Richard Bergen on the other night talking about this, which was obviously a complete waste of time listening to him about anything. But there are many people who are not the usual suspects. I mean, we've had various people on my programmes, for example, who've you know, said this is the first thing they're actually going to rebel about from a Labour perspective. So he's under pressure on this.
He is, and I think there's two reasons for that. One, I think that a lot of the new MPs that have come in here, yes, they are Starmerites, a lot of them, and they are sort of built in his image, but lots of them cut their teeth in politics during the Cameron and Osborne era, where they and their raison d'etre was fighting against austerity, and they are now saying, I did not come into politics to take money away from benefits claimants, no matter, you know, I think actually how much the public, I think, support getting a grip of the welfare bill. And the second reason, I think, is that a lot of these MPs are just thinking that next time, and even though it's 4 years until the next election, lots of them are toast, and they are toast because reform is coming for them. And reform now isn't really the party of, let's scale back the states, let's get rid of these massive amounts of welfare spending. Nigel Farage is almost positioning himself, you know, he flirts with the left a lot of the time, and he flirts with that sort of old blue-collar socialism.
Corbynism with the union flag.
Red Nigel.
Corbynism with the union flag, as Kemi Badenoch famously said. It's a very interesting one, though, Jack, isn't it? Because of course MPs, most of them, not all of them, but most of them want to be relatively loyal. They'll generally do what their whips say. But it doesn't feel as if there's a massive majority. It's never really felt like that, even though Keir Starmer has never felt particularly powerful, really. And if you have all these people potentially rebelling against him, they'll be much more concerned, as you're saying, about their jobs than party loyalty. That's what matters to them.
You're totally right. And that is the paradox, I think, at the heart of the Starmer government. He has this absolutely huge majority, biggest one since Blair. But he keeps on having to bend and cave and water down on stuff, you know, whether it's winter fuel or lots of other policies, you know, is sort of softening the benefits package. So it does seem that at the moment, while Keir Starmer does command a lot of troops in the House of Commons, he's really struggling to just stick with, I think, clear policies which he's done, because he's terrified of his backbenchers kicking up a fuss about it. And also, more than that, I think, he's terrified of the voters. And I think that it went very badly wrong very quickly for Keir Starmer in those opening few months of the election. Winter fuel, massive amounts of money for train drivers, national insurance hikes, freebie gate, Lord Alley, the whole shabam, Sue Gray. And I think that the trust was then lost in those early few months. And you know this, trust when lost in politics is incredibly difficult to win back.
Tell me a bit about another person I encountered today, Ed Miliband. I invited him on talk, hasn't been on for a while for some reason. Two of the North Sea's most controversial drilling projects are poised to go ahead. He has rewritten the rules on carbon emissions. Tell us about this story.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So the Jackdaw and the Rosebank oil fields, both up in Scotland, massive oil production plants for the UK. And originally they were going to grant new licences, to basically do some more drilling there, get some more fossil fuels and oil. Basically, the High Court ended up quashing it because of some technicality. It was brought by eco-activists, Extinction Rebellion and the like, I think. And they said that ministers hadn't done due diligence on the amount of emissions that these two plants would create, and so essentially thwarted any new licences. Now, for Ed Miliband, simultaneously, when he came in, he said that he was not going to grant any new oil and gas licences for the North Sea. This is his big green push to move towards renewables rather than fossil fuels. However, a decision was on his desk about whether or not they actually do contest the High Court and take it to appeal. And many people were sort of thinking, well, maybe he wouldn't do that because actually he says he doesn't want any new fossil fuel drilling. But now he is contesting it, and what he's also doing is rewriting the guidance around these two plants, which basically shows that ministers are more proactive to the emissions which they are going to create. And I think that it's going to be seen, and it is being seen, as a bit of a humiliation for Ed Miliband because he is such a zealot when it comes to net zero and environment policies. The fact that he's now almost admitting that yes, we do need these two drilling sites, I think is a bit of a humiliation for him.
Yeah, tell us a bit about the story they're pushing today as well in regard to the energy £150 announcement there. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's the warm homes discounts, £150 they said to families. Listen, obviously a lot of our readers and viewers would think £150, that is fantastic, but it is still half of the energy bill cut which we were promised in the election.
That's right.
And the Ed Miliband saying £300 for the election off the energy bills, and £150 doesn't go far enough. And also
highest energy prices in the world.
Exactly. And you're looking at Europe. I think our electricity prices are just off the scale when it compares to the rest of them. I think a lot of people are thinking before the election, a lot of people put their faith in Labour because they said they were going to cut energy bills, energy prices would come down. At the moment, they're not coming down. And so I think that Labour do have their work cut out to do this, although it does seem increasingly clear that there is a growing frustration, I think, in the country with net zero, and people who see the sort of the money in their pocket being hit by this, I think are getting a bit fed up with it.
Let's talk about the rape gangs, Rochdale fiends who abused girls as young as 12. They're still living in the UK because Pakistan refuses to take them back. They've renounced their citizenship of Pakistan. We can't get rid of them. This is just a plague that continues all the time, especially now Baroness Casey has directly linked illegal immigration to these gangs.
It's just absolutely shocking, and I think that we had a Sun Leader column this week which was, I think, saying that this is probably one of the biggest scandals in modern British history, and I think that everyone in their right mind is totally sickened by this, not just the actions itself.
But everyone in their right mind was sickened by it a long time ago, and now the establishment is just about catching up.
Just waking up to it as well, and just waking up to the fact that it was mainly Asian grooming gangs who were doing it.
And you're not racist to say that. It is not
totally
racist.
Not racist.
It is factual.
And for someone, I think it was actually really important earlier this week when someone as independent, fiercely independent, I think with the gravitas of Louise Casey, she doesn't bow to anyone in her opinions, and I think for her to come out and so explicitly say that the role of ethnicity has been covered up by authorities, from cops to councils to social services and the like, was an absolute disgrace. And so thankfully now the government is moving, but people will be equally sickened, not just the whole actions of the grooming gangs and the cover-up, but what's happening now in terms of thwarting people that should be removed from this country. You know, Labour talk the language now of deportations and returns and sending people back and no nonsense. But when people see cases like this, essentially two chancers who have managed to renounce their Pakistani citizenship and therefore they cannot be removed, people just look at it in absolute bewilderment and think, how on earth just the law, which is meant to protect people and and mete out justice in this country, behave in a way where basically there are loopholes, and so if you renounce your Pakistani citizenship, you can't make someone stateless in this country, so we can't get rid of them. And I think it's interesting, Pakistan is saying we can't take them back now because they're not Pakistani citizens. It's interesting, Keir Starmer at the weekend, and it was actually in the legal migration white paper a few weeks ago, proposed an idea where countries that refuse to take back their illegal migrants or foreign national offenders, they lose their visa rights. And so citizens from that country will find it much, much tougher to get visas coming to the UK.
They keep talking about this and whether they'll actually do it. I mean, in this particular case, Adil Khan and Kari Abdul Raf, part of a 9-strong gang of Asian men convicted of sex offences against vulnerable girls. And wait for it, 2012. Up to 47 girls as young as 12 were plied with alcohol and drugs, gang raped across Rochdale in a 2-year campaign of terror. The Home Secretary at that stage was Theresa May. She ordered the pair to be sent back to Pakistan in 2014. 10 years later, they still remain in Rochdale, where their victims are forced to live alongside them. Absolutely disgraceful. Is this going to get better? Have you any faith in the fact that we're going to fix this and maybe send some of these scumbags home? It seems impossible in this case, but is the government going to get a grip of this, do you think, Jack?
I mean, you know, you and I have been around long enough for cases like this to come up and up and up over and over again. You cannot open a newspaper without seeing them. And every time you have politicians saying, this has to end and this is absolutely disgraceful, but trying to change the law in this country in terms of laws like this is like turning around a tanker ship, it seems, and it is incredibly tough.
But it should be easy, shouldn't it? You've got a huge majority, you can do what you want. And I said this to Keir Starmer earlier on this afternoon. I said, blast furnace in Scunthorpe, you can sort that out in a day. You can recall Parliament, you can pass the legislation, you can do it. You can do these things quickly when you want to. You can order the courts and the gangs, you can order the courts and the Crown Prosecution Service to get people through when it comes to the riots. With this, action seems to just take so much more time.
And people are just bewildered sitting at home, and the politicians that grasp the nettle and actually deliver change are going to be the ones that reap rewards. You know, we might be able to talk about illegal migration later and the Channel crisis, for example, because I think that is something which is just a lightning rod for sort of a failure of state in the UK at the moment. People just cannot believe that boats are allowed to come day after day and there's nothing being done about it. They see pictures of French police sort of stood on the beaches of Calais doing nothing. They see Border Force picking people up. They see more migrants going into hotels and taking handouts. And I just think a lot of people are going, but why is this happening? But why can't we do something about it? Keir Starmer says it shouldn't be happening. He's the Prime Minister of a country, so why is it happening? And he's wielding this massive majority. And it's always, in a few weeks' time or a few months' time, the French are saying, oh, they're going to change their law so that their police officers can now intercept people in the Channel. They said that in February, and they're saying it's now going to be a few weeks.
And we're paying them £500 million to sort it out, and they're not sorting it out. Jack, thank you so much. That's Jack Elson, who's political editor of The Sun, rightly promoted to the dizzy heights. Good for him, and great to have you in the studio. Thank you, Jack. What do you think about what Jack is saying there? What do you think about what Keir Starmer is doing? We're going to hear from him at 5 o'clock, but in the meantime, what are your thoughts? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We've got the Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, is here in a second. We're going to talk to him about what on earth is going on in Iran. Are we on the brink of World War III? Let's hope not, but in terms of working out what's going on in Trump's mind, well, that's perhaps even more difficult than dealing with the Iranians. Stay with us.
David Lammy, I'd say quite frankly, absolutely lied to my face throughout this war. He's paid nothing but lip service, and to be frank, been an absolute embarrassment to our country. Now that we have British citizens that are caught up in this, the ability of the Foreign Office and himself is quite frankly shambolic. Israel is absolutely right to go into Iran. These are ballistic missiles. Thank God for the Iron Dome. Millions of people would be harmed if not killed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. Jane says, before the election, Labour said they were ready to govern. They had 14 years to prepare. How did they get everything so wrong? Cliff in Berkshire says there are 114,000 Iranian people living in the UK. We'd be bonkers to get involved, but I fear we will. Recruitment would be a real issue for the government, I suspect. Cliff, thank you for that. Thanks for your words. We'll get to some calls in a minute or two, but I want to talk to Mark Francois MP, the Shadow Defence Minister. He's also the Conservative MP for Raleigh and Wickford. Mark, great to see you in the studio.
Thank you, Peter.
What on earth is going on? Because I think where Trump's saying he may or may not strike Iran, the Wall Street Journal saying he's decided to attack, he says they don't know what's going on in his mind. We've got Keir Starmer in Cobra, the government's emergency committee, preparing for presumably quite a number of eventualities. You have people trapped in Israel from this country who can't get back. David Lammy's been criticised for that. Where are we at 22 minutes past 4 on Thursday afternoon?
Well, a key tenet of military operations is surprise. So if the Americans were to strike Iran, they're not going to be able to achieve complete surprise. We're talking about it live on television now. But I don't think they give them, last-minute warning that the planes are taking off. So it looks as if preparations are in place. There's one American carrier battle group in the region. There's another one approaching it. The Americans, as the world now knows, have B-2 bombers at Diego Garcia, and they're important because it's the B-2 is the only aircraft that carries this deep penetrator weapon, which was specifically designed to address underground targets like that. They built it for that kind of mission. So that leads you on to whether or not the Americans can use Diego Garcia. And we have an emerging situation today because it's being suggested in some media outlets that the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, who we know is a human rights absolutist, is telling the Prime Minister that he thinks that such an action would be against international law. So Downing Street at the moment are saying they don't want to discuss hypothetical situations, but it's possible that this situation could become non-hypothetical very quickly. So
they're saying that Hermer appears to be saying that defending allies is okay, but aggressive action isn't. But of course, with the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia, where on earth are we in that scenario? Tell us about that.
Well, I've got just the context quickly, aggressive action. Iran is an aggressive state. Iran has been funding Hezbollah for years. Iran was funding Hamas. Many people think they ordered Hamas to carry out that terrible massacre in October. They've been arming the Houthis, who fired rockets at British and other allied shipping.
They're all proxies of Iran, aren't
Correct.
they? And Hezbollah as well.
And there's another thing on the charge sheet. They've been giving ballistic missiles to Russia to fire at Ukraine. They are an absolute rogue state, and we and others have a right to defend ourselves against their actions, and the world would be a better place if Iran's ability to try and create a nuclear weapon, which one day they might be able to put on the tip of a missile, was removed. So we've got to understand the nature of the regime and the country that we're dealing with. Right, now hopefully there's no dispute about that. We come on to the agreement. I've got it here. It's a bit like the Brexit days again, always read the small print. If you go to Annex 1 of this agreement, which remember has been signed, it says here, the key paragraph here is point 2 in Annex 1. The United Kingdom agrees to expeditiously inform Mauritius of any armed attack on a third state directly emanating from the base on Diego Garcia. Now, what does expeditiously mean?
Hold on, so they have to inform Mauritius if we fire something from Diego Garcia?
Well, if that runway were used to attack a third country state.
Why was that agreed to?
Well,
what's it got to do with Mauritius? I know we're leasing it back, but I mean, they're allied, of course, with,
look,
China and Russia, and Russia's allied with Iran.
Well, you see, the Prime Minister told the House of Commons...
What a mess.
What
a complete mess.
I'm just warming to my theme.
Okay, all right, go for it.
I'm not arguing with your description.
No.
But look, the Prime Minister told the Commons recently that China had opposed this agreement. That's simply untrue. The Chinese congratulated the Mauritians when the negotiations were concluded. China has invested over $1 billion in Mauritius in recent years. It seems to me inconceivable that if we notified the Mauritians, they would keep that secret. Now, Philippe Sands, KC, rears his head again, who's represented the Mauritians for many years in London, a long-time personal friend of the Prime Minister. He told the House of Lords last week, expeditiously, in his interpretation, meant in advance. So, in Sands' opinion, if those American B-2s were to take off in order to drop the deep penetrator on this nuclear weapons site, or the enrichment site, then under the agreement, we'd have to tell Mauritius about that in advance. That is Sands' opinion. To me, militarily, that is insane.
Can I just get this straight in my head? Because what you've told me is, as you say, insane.
Well, I've quoted from the document about the legal.
Mark's not making this stuff up, okay? It's in the agreement that, in regard to Mauritius.
I don't know if I can show that to camera, but
you can.
There you go.
You can. It's there. Right. You can get it. You can get it online.
Yeah.
It is there. It is the agreement that we've signed with Mauritius. So, we had control of the... Let me just lay this out in my mind so I understand it. We had control of the Chagos Islands. They were British overseas territories. We decided to not have... we were in negotiations with the Mauritians. The Mauritians now have control of that territory. We lease back, at a huge cost to the taxpayer, one of those islands, which is Diego Garcia, where there are military bases, which is strategically...
Oh, we get a few other islands thrown in as well.
Oh, do we? Okay,
yeah.
Well, I'm sure that's...
We get the rest of the archipelago as well.
Marvellous. So we have all that, but the agreement says that if we launch a missile from Diego Garcia, which may well be one that we want to launch to Iran, we've got to tell the Mauritians. The Mauritians then tell the Chinese tell the Russians, or else they directly tell the Russians tell the Iranians. What's the point? What's the point of having it? What's the point of having the base there?
It's not just if we launched a missile. We've got
to tell beforehand.
Well, as far as I know, we don't have any long-range missiles based on Diego Garcia.
Right.
But there's a very long runway.
Yes.
Right? And so this says... any armed attack on a third state directly emanating from the base on Diego Garcia. So if a warplane takes off, if it emanates from the runway, we've got to tell the Mauritians. Now, go back a stage. I mean, it's fundamentally mad.
Yes.
Think what we're doing. Even leave aside the treaty for a moment. Just first principles in pub English, right? We're paying Mauritius £30 billion of British taxpayers' money at a time when, economically things are very tough, to rent back a bunch of islands that belong to us in the first place.
Yes.
Because Philippe Sands and Lord Hermer and others seem to believe that if we don't do that, we could somehow lose control of these islands under international law, but the government have never explained to...
Okay, sure.
The government have never explained to Parliament what that legal threat is.
And even if the legal threat is there, it's a threat and not an actual thing.
It's a legal opinion.
It's a legal opinion, but even if it is a threat, okay, let's say for the sake of argument that it is a threat.
By the way, it's not.
Okay.
It's nonsense.
Okay, so it's an opinion or possibly a threat. So preemptively, we've decided to give up the Chagos Islands, even though we didn't have to. And no one's ever explained why, and no one's ever said, well, it's a legal opinion that they may well be taken off us, but they haven't been taken off us yet. So we're going to preemptively solve, in inverted commas, the problem by giving them away. And now that has made us and the Americans and the West in general we're in a position now where, with that agreement you have in front of you, we've got to tell the Mauritians, who will probably tell the Chinese, the Russians and the Iranians, that we're launching from that runway. I mean, we're through the looking glass here, Mark.
We are, and it is Kafkaesque, and the government's whole argument is that we needed to pay this money to secure this base for potential future military operations.
But what's the point if you're going to have to tell your enemies beforehand anyway?
Bingo.
Okay.
Now, And by the way, this is important. This agreement was signed last month, but it's not been ratified by Parliament. Parliament could still reject this.
That's fascinating. So we could be hypothetically in a situation in the next few days, maybe, where planes are taking off from Diego Garcia.
Yeah.
We're seeing what's happening. We don't have to tell the Mauritians just yet that this is happening.
But it depends on your interpretation of expeditiously.
Right, okay. But essentially, Parliament, in theory, could reject the agreement you have in front of you. It's not absolutely nailed down.
It's not been ratified by both parties, no.
Okay.
But I presume the Attorney General would try and argue that because we've signed it, we're honour bound by it.
So there's still a chance, which you and your Conservative colleagues are pushing for, as we know and have consistently, for Parliament to reject this. How likely do you think it is you're going to persuade, I mean, you've persuaded me in the last 5 minutes, quite frankly, how likely is it you think you'll persuade enough Labour backbenchers and other parties to realise what an absolute crock of I can't say at 32 minutes after 4 this is?
Well, I think most Labour I mean, look, Labour MPs can read too. I would hope that every Labour MP would read this so they know what they would be voting for. Would that everybody had done that during all the Brexit debates. But anyway, I can't see how any self-respecting Labour MP could vote for this, because when that bypass that their constituents want is cancelled, or their A&E unit isn't upgraded, or that GP surgery isn't expanded, or that special needs school doesn't get built, people will say, well, you gave all that money to Mauritius, mate. So, you know, when we are in straitened economic times, as we all know, as your viewers know very well, why in God's name would you give someone 30 billion quid to rent back an island that you own in the... I mean, what self-respecting Labour MP could possibly vote for this and go back to their constituents who got their constituents in the eye?
And in the process, weakening our country and the West defences. It beggars belief. Mark, we will have to leave it there. That's been an education over the past few minutes. Thank you. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. No doubt we will talk again before too long. That's Mark Francois there. He's a Shadow Defence Minister, Conservative MP for Raleigh and Wickford. What do you think of this? I don't know about you, but honestly, I knew some of that, but not all of it. And in the last 6 or 7 minutes, I'm absolutely astonished. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. There are lots of people talking about Miliband and Starmer and Afghanistan. Has been referenced by Leslie. He says, remember when Biden unexpectedly left Afghanistan at midnight? Labour howled that Dominic Raab was on holiday, not evacuating civilians. Yet now we have Lamy telling British civilians to make their own way to Egypt. You're absolutely right, Leslie. And one of those is Zach Wagman. Zach is a Brit stranded in Israel. He's also a Conservative councillor for Stanmore in London. He came out on Wednesday last week to Israel with family, due to return on Monday. Zach, you're still there. What is happening? What have you been told? I know you were there for a family wedding. Did the wedding actually go ahead? Could it go ahead in regard to all the attacks that are happening on Israeli people at the moment from the Iranians?
Good evening, and thank you for having me on. As you say, we came out with family for a family wedding that ended up being held in very different circumstances to that which we had anticipated when we came. And to answer your question in terms of what we've been told to do, you alluded to it before, but the long and short of it is very little. The UK government has done absolutely nothing other than send a few emails telling us to wait for further information. We've heard rumours that they've told some people to make their way to land borders across the country, whether that's with Egypt or with Jordan. But as you well know, and as you've discussed, those are fraught with various logistical and practical difficulties. Yesterday, they got our hopes up by sending an email to everyone that had registered that there would be chartered flights, before then apologising that that was an administrative error and that email was never meant to go. So the long and short of it is, we're still here, we're waiting, and we're waiting for the government to help their people who are stuck across the other side of the world wanting to come home.
Can you just talk me through, just talk me through every interaction you've had with the Foreign Office? So you go out for the family wedding, hoping it to be a happy occasion. All of this happens, these strikes happen, this military action's happening, you're caught up in it, you're in shelters, I would imagine, you and your family at various points as well. Tell us a bit about that, but just talk through all of the interactions you've had with the UK authorities, because it's their job, it's the Foreign Office job to make sure you're safe and get you out when these things are happening. They've said you shouldn't be travelling to Israel, for example, not when you did, but since the attacks, obviously they're saying don't go to Israel right now. You went before then and absolutely legitimately and because you wanted to go to a family wedding and for it was safe then. But just talk me through the interactions you've had.
You're absolutely right that it's their job to look after us. And on Thursday night was when Israel began striking Iran. And I have to say, as someone that has lived all my life in London, I've never heard a bomb siren or a rocket siren before. And so when it goes off on your phone, the automated emergency alert that comes out over the phone and wakes you up in the middle of the night, startling is an understatement. It really is like nothing I've experienced before.
It must be pretty terrifying.
Absolutely, it's terrifying because one's not expecting it. As you say, last week, the advice was very much that you're okay to come here. There was no, there were rumours in the press that something might be happening along these lines, but nothing was expected like this. And it is terrifying when you see the notification on your phone saying, make your way to the shelter. You've got, depending on where you are in the country, you've got 1 minute 30 to get down there. It is really scary. And unfortunately now we've become used to that because that's happened the last 6 nights, 2, 3, 4 times every night. And, as I say, living in London, you've never had anything like it. And we go to bed putting our stuff next to the bed, knowing what we need to do when we have to rush out of bed in the morning. And so to answer your question in terms of what the government's asked for, after the sirens and the rockets began coming this way, at the end of last week, the Foreign Office finally asked us to register our presence here on a anodyne form on their website that was very vague. They asked name, phone number, details, who are you with, and tell us where you are. They didn't ask for where we're staying or our address. There was a drop down of 6 or 7 cities across Israel. Just let us know roughly where you are. And then we sent it off. And all we've had since then is automated updates from the Foreign Office website. So every time they update their travel guidance on the Foreign Office website, we get notified. So we were told that people should not come here anymore, which was a fat lot of good to people already here.
Yes.
They've then advised us that there will be certain commercial opportunities, i.e., taxis and companies and travel agents that will take you across the border to Jordan or to Egypt. But
have you been on holiday in Israel? You probably don't want to go across the border to Jordan and Israel. First of all, it's far. Secondly, if you're saying it's fine for a young, able-bodied guy like yourself, but I'm sure there are lots of people who are older who don't want to go by themselves. Egypt and Jordan. Less so Jordan, but they're not exactly Israel's best friends, are they?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I know some people that have made those border crossings successfully, and that's fantastic. But as you say, if you are vulnerable, if you are elderly, if you're taking young children, if you've got stuff to take with you, That's not somewhere you want to be going when there's no war on, traveling from Israel into Jordan or Egypt. Very clearly a Jewish tourist that's come on holiday there for whatever reason. So to suggest now that when the sirens could go off at any moment around the day, that you should drive across the country in a taxi, which would cost quite a lot, one would imagine. I don't know how much the taxi costs, but a few hours is sure to rack up the cost.
Of course.
To then queue up at these border crossings where no one knows what's going on, and then get across and have to get another taxi, and then potentially have to pay for hotels in Egypt or Jordan and different flights. It's totally unrealistic. And you might have seen...
And not what the UK government has done on many other occasions when these things have happened in other nations, is it? I mean, in the past, they've swooped in, they've done rescue missions, they've done flights to repatriation flights and so on. What's going on here, do you think?
Well, you are absolutely right. Afghanistan being a good example of that a couple of years ago, but across COVID, where they got into place and brought people home. And at first, I was willing to give the government a bit of the benefit of the doubt that maybe they didn't see this coming and it's a tricky scenario. But since then, we have seen country after country, Western European countries, bringing their citizens home. And it leads me to think there's only one answer. This is a choice that David Lammy and the Foreign Office are making. If their colleagues across Germany, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Czech Republic are able to bring their people home, there's not something logistical or practical stopping them then. If all of their colleagues can do it, they can, and they're making a choice not to.
So you're basically stranded at the moment?
You're absolutely right. I want to come home, but I can't because there's no safe route home from Israel to London.
It's crazy. What do you think will happen now? Have you actually at any point spoken to a human being at the Foreign Office?
No, we've not, and we've registered that there are family members and people that we're with who are vulnerable or elderly and need to get home. And I have to say, as you mentioned, I'm a councillor and I've been in touch with my local member of parliament and other colleagues that work in that world, and they're not getting much luck out of the Foreign Office either.
So if someone as connected as you're a councillor, you can talk to people in parliament, you lift the phone and get an MP on the phone, which not everybody, well, very few people, in fact, can do that. You're in a pretty powerful position in order to get access to these people. If you're in this position, what about people who are absolute, aren't in the fortunate position to have those connections? There must be so many stranded people there. Have we any idea how many British people are in Israel? I suppose it's hard to say, given that not everybody will have registered themselves.
You're right. I've heard that thousands of people have registered. But as you say, what about people that are here that maybe don't have access to a mobile phone or to phone signal, depending on where they are in the country? Or
which is very patchy. Our friends in Israel at the moment, getting in touch with them, making sure. Also, they're often elderly people that go out to see maybe grandchildren or something like that who aren't particularly good at the internet, or maybe that's not part of their skill set and so on. And so much of this just requires a human being to give you a ring and say, Zach, this is what's going on. Okay, it's a bit rubbish at the moment. In a couple of days' time, we're hoping that it's better. But actually, that's just not what the Foreign Office is doing. What are they for?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. There are a countless number of people sitting in the Foreign Office and no doubt in the British Embassy in Israel, the ones that haven't been evacuated. And
I forgot about
them and their families.
Do you know what? A lot of them have got out, actually.
Exactly.
They prioritise the diplomats.
And I totally understand getting their families out. But as you say, there's vulnerable people here. There are young children, elderly people, people that will need medication, people that have disabilities. And do you know what? Maybe it is hard to get these people out. But surely there is someone somewhere in the Foreign Office that, like you say, can pick up the phone and go, look, we're working really hard. We're going to tell you tomorrow. Or you can expect to hear from us on Saturday, or whatever it is. And it comes back to what I said. Germany, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, these countries, Western European nations, have been able to bring their people home. The United States, which must have at least 10 times the number of citizens stranded in Israel as the UK does, has in place a plan and has communicated to those Americans that have registered that they are chartering cruise ships and flights. It is a choice that the British government is making to not just do nothing for us, but to leave us here without that communication. I don't know why they're making that choice. As you say, a young guy like me, I can get by, but it's the people that really need to get home, those elderly people, those vulnerable people that are stuck, that can't afford to extend their stay in wherever accommodation they are, or don't have family to look after them here. Those are the people that need to get home. And the first duty of the British government is to look after British people. You know, we know they're not particularly good at that on the streets at home, but you think at least if something happens around the world, they'll help you get you home. And they usually do. But in this case, for whatever reason, they're sitting there and they're wiping their hands and they're saying, this isn't for us.
Well, you've spoken for a lot of those people who don't have a voice today, who are stranded there, Zach, and thank you for that. Just tell me before you go, how was the wedding? What was the atmosphere like? Could you celebrate?
Look, it's any time that two people get married, it's obviously a special occasion, irrespective. And I think it was very special that despite being under fire, from Iran, despite the Jewish nation being at war with its neighbours all around it, there was still a feeling of family and of celebration that we were able to be here together. Of course, it was not the unbridled celebration that we would have hoped, because some people were unable to make it because their flights were cancelled in coming, because they weren't able to get to the venue if they were coming from other parts of the country. But, it was always special to be with family, and in fact it made it extra special to understand what we were going through at that time, and to hear to be together despite that, standing together, proud of our faith and in unity with our family.
Thank you, Zach. I really appreciate you joining me today. Zach Wagman there, who is one of the many British people, thousands of British people, who is stranded in Israel. He's also a Conservative councillor for Stanmore. I should say that the FCDO, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, spokesperson, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, maybe they don't know either, let's say spokesman, said the safety and security of British nationals is our top priority. The Foreign Office is working around the clock to respond to the crisis and support British nationals affected. We recognise this is a fast-moving situation. If anyone says fast-moving situation one more time, we recognise this is a fast-moving situation that has the potential to deteriorate further quickly and without warning. That is why we're encouraging British nationals to register their presence and pay close attention to the travel advice. Well, that's a completely meaningless statement that says absolutely nothing. We're working around the clock to respond to the crisis. Just get them out. Just send a ship, send a plane, bring them home. That's what your job is to do. As Zach correctly said, many other nations have done that. Why can't the UK? Ridiculous. What are your thoughts about this? 0344 499 1000. Graham in Bushy says, is the Foreign Office and the embassy in Israel helping Brits stranded there with getting medicines, as they would not have had too many extra supplies with them, says Graham. Well, hopefully they can get them from Israeli pharmacies anyway. But yeah, that's a very tough thing. And on the gangs, the rape gangs as well, Chris in Chichester says, hi Peter, great show. As for people asking if there has been a cover-up, of course it has been covered up. How could it not, having been allowed to go on for so long? I'm sick of this country and the morons that run it, says Chris in Chichester. We'll get more of your comments, more of your thoughts, and of course we'll hear from the Prime Minister after 5 o'clock. I interviewed him a little bit earlier in this afternoon in the Midlands. I will of course play that out a little bit later on after 5 o'clock. Keir Starmer has spoken to Talk, first interview since he became Prime Minister to this station. We will hear from him before too long. We'll get your views first though after the break. Stay with us.
I trust the government to distribute nothing sensibly. The DWP is just a farce, and I have a fantastic office manager in Great Yarmouth who's fantastic at doing all our casework. We're right on it, and we try and deliver for our constituents. He used to work at the DWP.
So he knows how it works.
He got so frustrated by the sort of indiscriminate handout of taxpayers' money that he had to come and do a more sensible job.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including a person who says Labour said that after the election they would hit the ground running. The trouble is that they've been running in the wrong direction. Well, we're going to hear from Sir Keir Starmer after 5 o'clock. I've been speaking to him today. We'll hear what he had to say. Mike has been in touch and said Miliband said everyone would be £300 better off, not just people on benefits. Why are working people now subsidising and paying for this group? That is Mike in Herne Hill. Well, another thing the government's talking about today is overcrowded jails fueling prisoner violence. A direct link has been drawn between overcrowded conditions and increased violence for the first time. I must say I am not in any way shocked by that. Landmark sentencing reforms, the government says, mean offenders who behave badly can be held in prison for longer. Surely that was the case anyway. And they're going to put 40 million quid into tackling violence, contraband and drones. That, I would suggest, is the tip of the iceberg. David Shipley is a prison justice commentator. Am I wrong in any of those evaluations, David?
No, I think I agree with everything you've said. I mean, overcrowding...
Marvellous, thanks very much. Great to talk to you. I'm joking. Sorry, go ahead, David.
No, overcrowding, of course, contributes to violence. Although this analysis particularly is just looking at what's called double bunking, so putting two men into the cell, which would normally have one person in it, right? So it
has two bunk beds rather than it's designed for one person.
Exactly, yes. They put a double bunk bed in there, but you've got this tiny space, essentially the size of a car parking space and about 10 foot high. You've got a double bunk bed in there, a toilet, a sink, a tiny bit of floor, a place where you can sit and eat your TV, and you live, eat, go to the toilet there. And for most prisoners, they're in there for 22 hours a day. Now, I think most relationships, even really harmonious ones, would probably struggle to have no arguments in that sort of situation. And in prison, you're getting often complete strangers who might be of different faiths, have very different personality types, different hygiene, being put into a space like that. So it's very easy to see how that does lead to violence. There's other factors as well, like the drugs trade is a huge driver of violence in prisons, poor management, inexperienced staff, all of those things contribute to violence.
In terms of what is happening within those prisons, £40 million investment to tackle violence, contraband and drones. I mean, I would argue that those are probably three of the biggest problems that prisons have. 40 million isn't going to touch the sides, is it?
I fear it won't, but it's something. I mean, we saw at Long Lartin last month an attack on an officer, which it's been reported was done with a knife which had been delivered by a drone. So drones don't just bring in drugs, they can bring in very dangerous weapons. And the skies over many of our prisons have been described as being totally out of control. So it's a really scary issue. And the constant flow of contraband into prisons is, as I said, it's a driver of violence, it's a driver of lots of crime within prisons. Sometimes it spills over. So I know of one situation where a man at Wandsworth incurred a drug debt and people outside went to his mother's house to threaten her, saying you need to find thousands of pounds or we're going to kill your son. So it's not actually a separate world. It does harm out in the community as well.
Yeah, it's dreadful that happened. In regarding to £10 million for an anti-drone measures, such as exterior netting and reinforced windows. I mean, how many reinforced windows and exterior netting is that actually going to pay for in regard to so many prisons that are there? Because we know that drugs are getting into prisons via drones. They're also getting in through corrupt prison officers as well. Nothing in this about that, but from the look of things.
Yeah, and I think this is the channel, right? A lot of contraband does come into prisons via staff. Officers and also civilian staff can often be a big channel of drug supply in particular, and of phones and all these things. So we really need to grapple with that level of corruption as well. And I think what concerns me is the MOJ's counter-corruption unit. If you look at the stats, they are producing fewer and fewer referrals to the police every year. And they don't really seem to be grappling with the problem. They just seem to be brushing it under the carpet.
Yeah. In terms of James Timpson, Lord Timpson, who's a Minister for Prison, Probation and Reducing Offending, he, of course, he probably knows more than any prisons minister previously. He's someone who really has done an awful lot of research and taken a lot of action, employing a lot of ex-prisoners as well. How do you think he's doing? What's your assessment of how well he's doing in his job?
Yeah, I think James has got a really tough job. And although he knew lots about prisons, maybe he didn't realise quite how tough it was before he took it on.
Yeah.
I think he remains, when I've spoken to him, incredibly positive about the opportunities to make a prison system which works. He's really forward thinking about technology, and actually I think he believes that once we get through this period of crisis, which they hope they will, I think we all hope they will, there is a possibility to actually create a prison system that's very different, that's very, efficient because it uses lots of technology, and actually that might make a positive difference to people's lives.
David, thank you. That's David Shipley. He's a prison justice commentator, former prisoner himself as well. Very interesting to talk to him today. What do you think of this? The direct link drawn between overcrowded conditions and increased violence. I mean, that's sort of blindingly obvious, but with 40 million quid to tackle violence, contraband and drones in prison, is that going to be enough? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. On what's happening in the Middle East, Benji is in London. Benji, just a couple of minutes before the news, but what would you like to say?
I would like to say, regarding your conversation before about whether we could see any British involvement, I just wanted to say that I think it's highly unlikely that the UK would assist in any capacity, to be honest, because the only capacity that would have made sense for the UK to participate in would be defending Israel from these horrible ballistic missile attacks like it did last year. But Starmer actually said that it's not going to do that. However, at the same time, I don't think that Starmer will or could really say to Trump that he can't use Diego Garcia for, using the bunker busters on. Yeah,
Starmer's not going to tell Trump what he can and can't do, is he?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think it's unlikely that the UK the RAF will be sending any planes or anything like that. But some would say that by allowing the use of Diego Garcia, the UK would be somewhat involved. And I think this weekend, maybe Friday night, we're going to find out whether the US will be involved, because Germany, Britain and France are meeting with Iran on Friday. And I think Trump will strike unless some huge breakthrough is made that they give up their nuclear program, which I don't see happening. Yeah. And in my opinion, I don't agree with these negotiations. Anyway, I think that's what's going to happen.
Okay, really interesting to hear from you, Benji. Thanks. An interesting call, as always, when Benji gives us a ring. Appreciate your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Rob's been in touch and says, well, after hearing that Shagos that contract explained, I do believe that this has put the people of this country in massive danger. That's Rob Hawkins in Portsmouth there. Rob, it just sounds like a completely mad deal. I don't really understand it. Another person says 99% of all the flights out of Jordan are cancelled anyway. It's madness just in regard to getting those Israeli visitors, the people from the UK who are visiting Israel, out of there. Ian says, great show. I just have to say, oh my goodness, what is happening to this country? The people in charge couldn't run a sweet shop. Where will we be in 4 years? Well, Willy Wonka himself, Sir Keir Starmer, has been interviewed by me this afternoon, and we will hear that interview in just a second here on See It. By all means, go to your connected TV and switch it on, and you will see it in all its glory. I interviewed him in a kitchen in Staffordshire. We'll find out why. We'll find out what he has to say. Only had about 7 minutes with him, but I got some answers, I think. Stay with us.
the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. In a moment, we're going to hear from Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. He's given his first interview as Prime Minister to Talk. I did that this afternoon in Staffordshire. He had a cost of living announcement, but I talked to him a little bit about that, but I mainly talked to him about the rape gangs, about immigration, and about Iran and Israel. We'll hear all that he had to say to me in just a few minutes' time. We'll get analysis of that from James Heal, the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. And on the gangs aspect specifically, we're going to talk to one of the most senior retired officers, now retired, but one of the most senior police officers specialising in child protection, Jim Gamble. We'll talk to him. We'll get reaction from Isabel Oakeshott as well. We're hearing reports into our newsroom as well that KLM, the Dutch airline, may be cancelling flights to the Middle East over the next few days. Of course, we're very closely monitoring the Iranian situation in regard to Israel. We've spoken to people there. We're going to continue to do that in regard to getting the Brits home, and how safe is that region at the moment. Are we on the brink of a regional or perhaps even larger war, and what will Trump do? We'll talk about that with our international editor a little bit later on. Lots to discuss between now and 7, and we'll hear from the Prime Minister in just a minute. I want you to watch and listen to it, and then I want your reaction. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, as I said, I came back from, went up to and came back from Staffordshire today. Sir Keir Starmer was in Staffordshire, in someone's home actually, talking about the cost of living announcement. It's a warm homes guarantee, more money for people who are on that scheme. I also caught up with him about a number of other issues, including, of course, the grooming gangs, the rape gangs. I talked to him as well about immigration, and I talked to him about Iran and Israel. This is what the Prime Minister said to me earlier on today in Staffordshire, his first interview with Talk since becoming Prime Minister. You have proven you can act quickly and decisively when you want to. You recalled Parliament, you put through legislation in a day in regard to the Scunthorpe blast furnace. You directed the police and the courts in regard to the rioters last summer. Why not direct the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, which you used to lead today, to prioritise catching gang members who have raped children, start solving this today instead of waiting for an inquiry?
Great challenge, and that is exactly what we've done.
How much more money have you given?
So the spending review puts more money towards policing, but the instruction is absolutely clear to go after these vile criminals. I've long said, I mean, grooming is an awful crime. I prosecuted the first case best part of 15 years ago. The first time there was a grooming case in our court, I took the decision to prosecute. But I know from talking to victims the impact it has. I've always said the first port of call should be a criminal investigation. Yes, there will now be a national inquiry. There has to be accountability. But for victims and survivors, the most important thing is there's a criminal investigation where there can be, and that where perpetrators are convicted, they then go to prison. And that is by far the best and most important way of dealing with this vile offence.
Do you regret being against an inquiry? You said some of the people calling it were jumping on a right-wing bandwagon. Are you going to apologise for that?
Well, the people I was referring to, and I made this absolutely clear when I said it, were the politicians who had been in power and done absolutely nothing. And then as soon as they're out of power, are screaming and shouting. So Kemi Badenoch, Chris Philp, those individuals, when they were in power, did absolutely nothing. Now, I've been campaigning and working on this for 15 years, and have as many other people. Initially, we were looking at local inquiries, but I asked Louise Casey to just do an audit to assure me there wasn't more that we could do. She's done that. She's written that up. It's a pretty long report. I've read every single word of it. She's recommended a national inquiry. I accept her recommendation. That'll be a statutory inquiry and we'll get on with it. It runs alongside the criminal investigation, by the way. It's very important. It's not one or the other, because the first route should always be the criminal route, in my view, because where we've got perpetrators that are convicted, they should be in prison.
Over 40,000 illegal migrants have arrived in small boats since you've been Prime Minister. It's the worst year on record. Your approach just isn't working, is it?
We're, absolutely serious about the response to what is a serious problem. In the end, the way to deal with this is to bring down the gangs that are running this trade, and it is a trade. They're making huge amounts of money. That's why we are increasing law enforcement powers. There's a bill going through Parliament which will give counter-terrorism powers to our law enforcement, the ability to get in much earlier. We're working with international partners. I raised this in my discussions with the French president when I saw him earlier this week, with the Chancellor in Germany, with the Prime Minister of Italy, because we've got to come down even harder on these gangs. We're determined to do so. I know we've got to do more. That's why I'm working with our partners to do that, particularly in relation to law enforcement in the north of France. And that I raised directly with the French president. We're working together on this. But we are absolutely determined, with the extra powers to our law enforcement, working with our partners, and then importantly, where people do come to the country who aren't entitled to be here, processing their claims and then returning them to where they came from. And since we've been in power, 30,000 people who've no right to be in the United Kingdom have now been removed from the United Kingdom because we're processing the claims. It's the highest number for the best part of 10 years. But I accept the challenge. There's more that we've got to do.
Are you going to back President Trump if he goes to war with Iran?
Well, it's a fast-moving situation in the Middle East. I share the concern about the nuclear program of Iran. I absolutely clear in my mind that Israel has the right to self-defense. I do think that we need to de-escalate the situation. There's a huge risk now of escalation across the region. I'm talking to regional leaders on a daily basis. They're very concerned about escalation. It could spill very easily into Gaza, which is already an intolerable situation. And obviously it's having an impact on the economy. So I'm clear in all of my discussions, we need to de-escalate this. Yes, deal with that nuclear program, but de-escalate and deal with it, as was the case, in recent weeks, with negotiations and an outcome that is a diplomatic outcome.
Prime Minister, you say what you're announcing today will help people such as families here in Staffordshire save £150 on their bills, with energy bills some of the highest in the world here in the UK. Is your policy of net zero actually just storing up price rises and energy insecurity for the future?
No, complete opposite. What we've seen is that particularly conflict adds to our energy prices. So energy prices have gone up. They're 40% higher than they were at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The reason they've gone up is because we're on the international market, the fossil fuel market, and therefore we're impacted by the actions of others in conflict. So the long-term aim here and intention is go to renewables, which are cheaper. We have control over them, security, and therefore we're not affected when there's international conflict. But in the meantime, what I recognise and what today is all about is that this winter, next winter, people need help with their bills. And that's why we're rolling out now for nearly 6 million households, so many more people, but 6 million households, £150 off your energy bill this winter. And we're in Nicola's kitchen here. She's training to be a teaching assistant. She's working hard. She's on UC, but having £150 towards her energy bill, she tells me, will make the big difference to her, really get her through the winter for the energy bill. She's got 3 young children. That's not an untypical case. So I'm really pleased that we can make that announcement today. And for many, many families, when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of money and we struggled to pay our bills. I actually know what it feels like to fear the postman coming with a bill. Nicola, equally now, not the postman, but she's got a smart meter. She knows this is going to make a material difference to her. And politics is about who do you have in your mind's eye when you make decisions. And it's hardworking people like Nicola who will be helped by this £150 off your bill this winter.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for speaking to Talk.
Thank you.
Well, that is Keir Starmer, who spoke to me a little bit earlier on in Staffordshire. Standing by with this analysis is James Heal, who is the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. James, what did you think of what the Prime Minister had to say?
Well, listening to that, Peter, I was just hearing the voice of Rishi Sunak and just hearing the kind of lines he was trotting out, talking about energy prices being 40% higher than the start of the Ukraine-Russia war, talking about the big challenge of the boat crossings. I could close my eyes and almost hear the sort of last 3 years of British politics. And so it seems that although we replaced the leader, the Prime Minister of our country, very much the same excuses are being trotted out, etc., because the same problems are facing the UK.
Yes, and certainly he was talking on the last answer there about giving people more money on the Warm Homes discount. That, of course, will be lost in regard to everything that's happening. What do you make about what he said about Iran and Israel? Because he keeps saying it's a fast-moving situation. Well, yes, it is, but what are we going to do?
Well, I think, Peter, that answer actually betrays the reality, which is that we're not really involved in this conflict. I mean, at the end of last year, I think there was an attack on Israel and UK jets were involved in defending that and defending our Israeli allies. This time we seem to be very much more playing a lesser role. And I think that's reflected in how much Keir Starmer doesn't seem to be making the narrative. On Tuesday, he was saying that America wasn't going to escalate. And of course, then we had the Trump all caps message on Truth Social saying unconditional surrender. So I don't think that we're particularly involved in it. Obviously, there's lots of activity going on. The UK has an important base in Tehran in terms of our embassy, but actually we are not the main people making this. Once again, all eyes of the Western world are on Donald Trump.
They certainly are. They certainly are. In regard to the gangs, I got a couple of answers out of him on that. Of course, they're very time limited, as is always the case with these interviews. But do you really feel that action will be taken, James? Because we've had this sort of preview from Louise Casey. I just do worry that a lot of senior politicians, possibly including the Prime Minister, will hide behind it and say, well, now there's an inquiry and we can't really say very much and we'll see what the inquiry comes up with. I mean, most people know roughly what it's going to come up with. Of course, there will be a lot of probing to do, and it'll be very interesting to see whether heads actually roll and people are imprisoned because of their actions there. But certainly the point that I pressed him on, saying, well, you could just direct people today. He said we're already doing that. I'm not sure they are actually doing that to the degree that people would like. Yvette Cooper hasn't really come out and said, well, I want every police force in the United Kingdom to have this as their number one, well, maybe not number one, but certainly a very, very high priority alongside murders and rapes of adults, and certainly in regard to very, very serious crimes like armed robbery. It just doesn't seem that the impetus is there.
Yeah, I think that's a real risk of that. And of course, how much is it going to involve on different institutions inspecting their own homework? That's the key question, I think. Look, I mean, Keir Starmer, of course, was dragged kicking and screaming to doing this. He didn't really want to do it. I was talking to one senior Tory this week who was just baffled that the Prime Minister didn't adopt that strategy until January by calling an inquiry and therefore saying, look, we can't talk any more about it. The inquiry's going on. It'd be wrong to sort of prejudice or impede its proceedings. Because I think that actually Keir Starmer can tell a decent story on this, because he was involved in some of those prosecutions. I think that's partly why he's got a blind spot on it, Peter, which is that he feels it quite personally and he's quite sensitive. But therefore that...
Sensitive to criticism, perhaps. Sensitive that he was in charge at the Crown Prosecution Service when they failed on this issue.
Yeah, well, indeed. But I think he would say, I did my best. I actually prosecuted this. How dare these people come along? And I think that, as you say, Peter, that ignores actually there were massive state failings involved, and actually that the debate has changed. And of course, that a lot has happened since he was Director of Public Prosecutions at the current CPS. And so I do think that there's that sensitivity perhaps has blinded him to making the right call on this one.
James, thanks for that analysis. That's James Heal there, who is Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. Let's hear from you. Nick says, poor you, Peter, up to Staffordshire and back on a hot, sweaty day for that. He looked like a rabbit caught in the headlights, says Nick. Simon says, the bloke is a liar. Is Starmer telling you that he knew about the bills coming to his father's house when he was a child? He was saying that. Barry says the situation in Iraq is concerning after the debacle of the situation in Iran, I should say, is concerning after the debacle of Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya. I believe the Prime Minister will have no hesitation in deploying UK armed forces into conflict because it will deflect from his domestic woes, says Barry. Sean says, I know you're incredibly time limited, but what a load of garbage Starmer spouted lie after lie after lie, says Sean in Bridlington. Simon says, congrats on your interview with Two-Tier. First observation is he looks like a frightened rabbit. Was it a small kitchen? A number of people have actually made a few references to the fact that I am taller than the Prime Minister. I'm 6'1". I think perhaps the angle of the photograph that I put out on Twitter as well, quite a few comments on there saying that I look quite large. Someone referred to the Prime Minister as being very short. He's not really. I'm just quite tall, and also the sort of angle was over my shoulder. But listen, you know, he did the interview, got a good 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes out of him. That's longer than we've had from him since he became Prime Minister, although I interviewed him a couple of times before he became Prime Minister. But listen, what do you think of that interview? Did it move you in any way? Did anybody learn anything from it? Was it something the Prime Minister tackling those issues? What about grooming gangs as well, rape gangs? We're actually going to talk in just a second to Jim Gamble, who is a former senior police officer who specialises in child protection, about what the Prime Minister actually said and whether there will be the action needed to sort out the gangs. Plenty to discuss. I want your views on it too. 0344 499 1000.
I trust the government to distribute nothing sensibly. The DWP is just a farce, and I have a fantastic office manager in Great Yarmouth who's fantastic at doing all our casework. We're right on it, and we try and deliver for our constituents. He used to work at the DWP.
So he knows how it works.
He got so frustrated by the sort of indiscriminate handout of taxpayers' money that he had to come and do a more sensible job.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to the person who says, I cannot believe a word Keir Starmer says. He has never walked the walk. Lies. Another person says, Hills from Wales says, what a lying slug that man is. On just 1 point, Labour hasn't returned 30,000 illegals. Most of them were overstayed, who volunteered or were paid to go home. I knew I shouldn't have listened. My blood pressure has risen. Well, plenty to discuss. Let's talk specifically about the gangs and the rape gangs. And Jim Gamble is with me. He's a former senior police officer who specialises in child protection. Jim, it's good to talk to you. I just wonder, before we reflect on the interview specifically, maybe you could give me your wider view of this week, what Louise Casey said. Some of it, I mean, really shocking, and some of it, I would imagine, blindingly obvious as well. An entire chapter in her report, which I'm sure you've read every word of, which simply was entitled Denial. Will there be a major change in how this country deals with the rape gangs?
Well, I hope there will be, but it needs to begin with listening to victims and survivors, and that's easy to say, but that's about developing training where those people who have been subject to the horrors that these gangs have inflicted inform how police officers, social workers, and others actually think. And there was nothing in Louise Casey's report that we didn't already know. And I think, to be fair, what happened at the beginning is the government adopted a position, regardless of the pivot now, which was they weren't going to have a national inquiry. And they brought in Louise Casey, and I think the expectation was that quite sensibly they'd consolidate all of the information they had and identify trends, themes, and patterns, and then consider what to do. But clearly, Louise Casey, who is a deeply committed children first safeguarding professional, has looked at this. And even though there's nothing new in it, has been struck, I think, by the testimony that she's received from victims and survivors, and she's pushed for this. So the government are placed in a fait accompli position where actually having consolidated the information, they're now needing to respond to it. And I really think the important thing here is to stop the party political point scoring. If no one has covered themselves in glory in this, not senior police officers, including myself, not politicians, not anyone over a long period of time. We've got this wrong.
What could you have done differently, Jim? You're saying even senior police officers like you could have done things differently.
Well, look, I think from my point of view, back in the early days of CEOP, we recognised that when children went missing, that they were exposed to greater levels of risk from people who operated in proximity to them. And we didn't necessarily recognize them as the gangs that they were at that time. I did what I could when Theresa May pivoted us away from that and assimilated us into the much larger National Crime Agency by resigning in protest, because I thought that was wrong. There's got to be somewhere where actually children are the priority, not a priority amongst many. But we, have allowed ourselves to be seduced by language, to be pushed back for fear of actually being perceived to be politically incorrect. And there's no doubt that culture and race have been used by offenders within this as shields, as shields to prevent, thorough and forceful investigation by local police, by local services. But I think that my fear here now is that we pivot and we move, to a template position that's not going to make any difference. Because you can have gangs where the common theme will be that these men living in proximity to these vulnerable young people have one thing in common. They all come from a particular background. And we hear the Pakistani rape gang phrase all the time. But this is where we've got to be really careful. And this is coming from the person that commissioned the Child Q review. We walk a very fine tightrope on this, that we don't actually, by our actions, discriminate against individuals. The Pakistani community per se are not rapists. There are some individuals from within their community who come together, who hide behind culture, who pervert it to excuse, to minimize, self-justify, and blame everyone but themselves for what they do to these innocent young people. So there's nuance in this, and we've got to make sure that that nuance is not lost or missed, because keeping the balance right in this is going to be critically important. And it's why I don't agree that this is a national issue in the sense that it's being painted to be. It happens.
Does that then mean that a national inquiry isn't the best way to deal with this, Jim? What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think if the national inquiry is going to look at what happened, what went wrong, what lessons can be critically learned, and where they find evidence of malfeasance in public office, if they find evidence that people perverted the course of justice by not doing what they should have done to protect the most vulnerable, that national approach is of value. But if we're going to then pivot to say, what can we do differently? What have we learned? I was Deputy Director General of the National Crime Squad dealing with serious and organised crime. I've been the head of counter-terrorism in Belfast in Northern Ireland, as well as the work that I've done around human trafficking and other issues. And I tell you this is serious and it's damaging to children and young people. It's serious crime, but it's not organised crime in the true sense of it. These gangs, their roots are local. They are absolutely embedded within local communities, and that's where they hide, and that's where they feed off the vulnerabilities of these children. It's not like an organised crime gang where they are making money through using young people as a commodity for cash. It's too localised for that. Okay. They're not an organised crime syndicate that is running county lines, the drug trafficking, where you can follow the money and follow the network. These are groups of people who have a network locally, who are in the proximity to young and vulnerable people, and they use that proximity to offer them the gifts of friendship, the gift of belonging. And this is why it's so complex and complicated, because they bring these young people in and they normalize behavior that's not normal. Jim. And I've spoken to many victims and survivors who'll be the first to tell you in the early stages of that, they were the people that pushed local policing or local social care back. So just let me say this, Peter, if the government really wants to make this work, put their money where their mouth is, and that's got to be properly funded, operationally focused, multi-agency teams in the areas where this is really predominant.
And that is exactly what I asked the Prime Minister today. Let's just remind ourselves of what Keir Starmer said to me about rape gangs, and specifically about police funding and prioritisation. We'll get Jim's reaction in a second, but just to remind ourselves what Keir Starmer said to me. You have proven you can act quickly and decisively when you want to. Why not direct the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, which you used to lead today, to prioritise catching gang members who have raped children, start solving this today instead of waiting for an inquiry?
Great challenge, and that is exactly what we've done.
How much more money have you given?
So the spending review puts more money towards policing, but the instruction is absolutely clear to go after these vile criminals. I've long said, I mean, grooming is an awful crime. I prosecuted the first case best part of 15 years ago. The first time there was a grooming case in our court, I took the decision to prosecute. But I know from talking to victims the impact it has. I've always said the first port of call should be a criminal investigation. Yes, there will now be a national inquiry. There has to be accountability. But for victims and survivors, the most important thing is there's a criminal investigation where there can be, and that where perpetrators are convicted, they then go to prison. And that is by far the best and most important way of dealing with this vile offence.
Jim, do you know what I would have loved the Prime Minister to have said in reaction to my question? I would have loved to have said, do you know what? I've spoken to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. We've given the police more money, although the Home Office budget overall has been reduced. What we want is an operational acknowledgement that this is a much bigger issue for the police and for the Crown Prosecution Service than it has been. I want them to prioritise this. I will direct them in the way that they directed them previously in regard to the riots, that was a priority, in the way that he directed them previously in other ways, that this is a number one or a very, very strong priority. And what has happened is the police may have more money, but they will always say they need more money no matter how much there is. And this hasn't actually been prioritised in the way that I think it could so easily be done. What's your reaction to that?
Well, look, number one is, you know, I worked with Keir Starmer when he was DPP and I was head of the Child Exploitation Online Protection Centre. His credentials go without saying from my point of view, and I've heard the criticisms of him. I believe that he wants to do the right thing. But actually, I think that needs to be done in a different way. And if you look at the context of where we currently are, this government have come in and there is a wider and deeper reform agenda than there's ever been across children's social care. You know, for example, we're moving to a family safeguarding model. Well, what does that mean? It means there's lots of things happening that need to be invested in. So there's lots of reform, but very little money. And when we talk about the spending review in policing, the red circled money, from my understanding, is going into neighbourhood policing. But I'm led to believe that the Metropolitan Police are still going to have to reduce the number of officers they have, for example, because the spending review doesn't meet their need. And I think if we pivot to the National Crime Agency, it sits in a national position. And as we've already said, the key in this is going to be building on the likes of the family safeguarding model, looking at local where we can bring police officers, social workers, educated and others, education professionals and others into the same room, but they're going to have to be funded. So they cannot do all things in all places at all times. So you're right, they're going to have to prioritise. But they've got to do that in the context of young people being gang affiliated. And I'm not talking about, you know, group-orientated grooming. I'm talking about where young people are indoctrinated into gangs and behaviours are normalised. I'm talking about peer-on-peer abuse, which is a much, much more, you know, high volume end of abuse of children and young people. So we have an epidemic that's taken place. You know, 8 out of 10 people who are captured downloading indecent images of children, child sex abuse material, and many of these gangs will capture that themselves. 8 out of 10 who are caught and taken to court walk free. So there needs to be a position now where the government pause. They need to think about where they invest to make the greatest difference to reduce the greatest amount of harm. And once they have that plan in place, then they need to move forward. Simply knee-jerking and saying, well, we'll tick the box for the National Crime Agency because that sounds right. Actually, that won't work. Okay. You've got to go local, you've got to go hard, and you've got to invest in it, focused on these people to hold them to account for the awful things they've done.
Jim, thank you. That's Jim Gamble there, former senior police officer who specialised in child protection nationally, also very senior police officer in the Police Service of Northern Ireland as well. Serge is in Buckinghamshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Serge, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about this issue?
Thank you so much, Peter. First of all, I'd like to address how the grooming or the raping gang offenders are being aggressed. Yeah, they are not Asian. Yeah, I am a Sikh man. I have Hindu friends, Sikh friends. Yeah, they are not Sikh, they're not Hindu, they're not Japanese or Chinese or Korean. They are Pakistani. Stop playing these games with people. Secondly, I would like to say regarding the inquiry, I would like 3 people on that inquiry, whether anybody agrees with me or not. The first person is Maggie Oliver.
Agree.
Of the General Manchester Police organisation, who resigned over this matter.
That's right, former detective constable. That's a really good idea, Serge. I know others have had that idea as well. Totally agree with that.
I'm not saying they should be put on to make a decision, but they should be put on the inquiry because they have a lot of information that could be eradicated.
Totally agree. Who are the other 2?
Yeah, and the other 2 are Raja Mia from Oldham.
Okay, tell me about him.
I think he should be on the on that 3-person committee that I'm talking about.
Okay,
this is somebody who, although he's Muslim, has fought against this all of his own life. Yeah.
Okay, and the third person, Serge?
Pardon?
And the third person, if you don't mind?
And the third person is Mohan Singh from the Sikh Awareness Society.
Okay.
This is somebody who's been fighting this problem for nearly over 30 years. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to look at somebody for information, these 3, I don't think there's more better 3 people in the country that can give you the information that we need to get a result.
Thank you for your thoughts there, Serge. Appreciate that. And if you agree or disagree, certainly I don't know the other 2, I must say, but Maggie Oliver, absolutely no question in my mind. And Serge, thank you. Very good suggestions there, certainly in regard to Maggie Oliver. As I say, I don't know the other 2, but happy to look into that. And of course, many people will have ideas about what this inquiry should look like, what its terms of reference should be, and of course, how wide-ranging it should be. Frankly, I say, make it as wide-ranging, give it unlimited powers in terms of looking into people. They've got to lift the stone. We may not like what's underneath the stone. I don't care. If people covered things up, if people facilitated this, if people did anything at all that meant that children were raped, well, they've got to be held accountable. Thank you for your reaction to what Jim was saying there. Leslie says, sorry, but that ex-police officer Jim Gamble is wrong. It was gangs on a national scale. Those girls were passed around nationally, not locally. Stuart says, your interview with Keir Starmer shows he constantly chooses the wrong side and continues regardless until forced to change sides. Casey didn't add anything new. Smash the gangs is failing and Iran is our sworn enemy. I agree with you. I don't think Casey added that much that was new necessarily. He certainly said the scale of the problem was huge. We know. It's a useful thing to happen, but why have the fig leaf? I mean, really nothing, hasn't really changed anything. It simply said, oh right, well, Keir Starmer says now there's going to be an inquiry, and if I'd had more time, I'd have pressed him on that and said, you know, what has really changed here? Why is it so different? Why was a national inquiry something you railed against, not something you're for? Because I agree with Stuart that not a huge amount really changed. Ernie's been in touch and says, Starmer keeps saying we're working with our partners to sort out the boats crisis. Who are the partners? We don't have any. The definition of partner is 2 or more people working together in the same activity to achieve the same result. No one's helping us to put a stop to this illegal activity. That's just another lie. I worry, Ernie, that he genuinely thinks the French are helping us. And one more from Lee in Bristol, who says, Keir Starmer must be an avid listener of talk. He knows that he gets taken the mick off for repeatedly saying smash the gangs, so he changed it to bring down the gangs. Great interview, he made him look like the weasel he is, says Lee from Bristol. Well, lots more to respond, lots more calls coming up. We're going to talk to Isabel as well. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor, about, well, whether we're sleepwalking towards World War III, minor issue, and a few other issues as well. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Neil, lost in North Wales. He says the public need to hear the whole interview about Diego Garcia you had with Mark Francois earlier. Totally agree with you, Neil. We will make sure that it's all on our YouTube channel, and there's loads on our YouTube channel, loads of previous interviews. You can watch us, you can watch previous shows and so on. But that particular interview, I was just astonished. I mean, my reaction was just kind of just I suppose not so much an interviewer or a presenter, but like just had Mark Francois just told me that over a coffee or something, I was absolutely incredulous what he was saying about Diego Garcia, about the fact that we could, if this is ratified, if we want to launch an attack from Diego Garcia, our own sovereign facilities, our own, well, they were previously, but our own military, that we would have to inform the Mauritians, who of course then would tell the Chinese or the Iranians or the Russians. Crazy. But Neil, thank you for that. We will take your suggestion on board and do it. We deliver. Derek says, just deport the foreign criminals. Australia does it, the USA does it, Germany does it, France does it. Why the incompetent UK does not? Why, says Derek? Well, human rights law, of course. Lord Hermer, chief woke human rights lawyer, is of course the Attorney General, and he doesn't want it to happen. He says, send the immigrants to the Falkland Islands. Australia stopped immigration in 1 week. Leslie says, if prison conditions are so bad, it doesn't seem to stop prisoners at reoffending time and time again. Do you know what? We had the weirdest experience when we're coming back from Staffordshire. I was interviewing the Prime Minister there earlier in Staffordshire, and we're standing at a sort of our connection, myself and producer Chris, and Chris has been brilliant today. He's been a really, really good colleague. He always is, but he's been working very, very hard to get that interview sorted. And this guy just started chatting to us at the railway, on the railway platform, and we sort of said, oh, what are you up to? And we said, oh, we're just going back to work here. We've just been working up here. And he said, well, actually, I've just got out of prison. And he'd been reoffending and gone back into prison. He'd broken a probation order. It was just a slightly bizarre thing, but interesting guy to talk to, even though he's done some really horrible things. Dan and Ken says, afternoon, Peter, I'm wondering if Israel is giving the cold shoulder to our government. Don't forget, Lamy has recently sanctioned 2 government ministers and criticised them for Gaza. You're correct on that, Dan. Maybe British citizens are stuck in Israel because the government have no communication. I don't think that's the case, Dan, but certainly there's a lot more they could do. Howard says, I've lived and worked in many countries since 1980. Embassies are always helpful till Cameron or May reduce their remit. Waste of time really these days. Recent events in Kenya prove that to me, with one consulate employee quoting the famous Francis Urquhart from House of Cards, the original House of Cards. You may very well think that I couldn't possibly comment, says Howard. And James says, nothing I haven't heard before from Starmer. He's a robot. I could run the country better, doing only a 3-day week. And talking of weak, he is a very weak Prime Minister, says James. Well, James, by all means, stand for office, run as an MP, see how you get on. I absolutely salute anybody who stands for office, whether it's council, parish council, whatever it is. Anybody who stands for office is a brave thing to do, and James, perhaps you will do it. Mike is in Stoke-on-Trent. I was not too far away from you earlier on today, Mike. Thanks for the call. 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
Right, very quickly. Now, the answer is not vulgar, so I'll tell you this now. Here's a question. If I called Keir Starmer an illywhacker, would you agree with me?
An illywhacker?
Illywhacker. ILLYWACHAKER. And I heard this off a political commentator on another channel the other day.
I don't know what that word means.
It's Australian.
Okay.
It's a term for small-time con man.
Right.
No, I think that fits Starmer down to a T.
Do you know what? We have a makeup artist called Vanessa, who's Australian, and I'm going to ask her if she's heard that before. Illywhacker. ILL. Give me it again. ILL. Illywhacker.
Illywhacker. WACHAKER.
Okay. Well,
a gentleman called a man Bogle used it on the telly the other day.
Okay. Well, Mike, Vanessa's going to come in to make me look vaguely human in one of the breaks coming up, and I'm going to ask her if she has heard that phrase. She is one of our.
Two very quick things.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
When he was talking, I felt like sticking my head in a bucket and shoving my finger down my throat.
It is a hot day.
Yeah, no, that's because I'm listening to that garbage that he comes out with.
Okay.
I mean, look, he goes on about the gangs, right? They said they weren't going to have a public inquiry. They were going to have 3 local inquiries. Then the day before Christmas, 5. Then they watered it down again to £5 million. Now, my wife has come up with a very good question.
Okay.
£5 million for grooming gangs inquiries in this country. And yet over the last near on 20 years, we spent about £15 million trying to find one child lost in Portugal.
It's a very fair point. And listen, I would love Maddie McCann to be found. It would be a wonderful thing. But it's a very, very small amount of money in terms of £5 million. Certainly, Mike, I think that there is a very, very strong case for the National Inquiry to have a very large budget, to have hopefully not too much time, because we know what the problem is, and we can't just wait forever for results. But I want them to get to the bottom of it. I really, really do. Chris says, well done in your interview, but Starmer is a liar. The other thing, I believe a lot of money has been handed over by these rape gangs. As in crime, nothing is free. Someone made money on this, be it teachers, politicians, police, social services and gang leaders. I'm not sure I agree with you, Chris. I'm not sure where the money would actually come from. Of course, if the children were being pimped, there would be money there. But actually, this is... Look, all of it's terrible. County lines, dreadful, dreadful thing, using children as mules, essentially. That's for money, and you can... I want to be really careful with the words I'm using here. I can see the economic imperative. I can see people want to make money, so they would do that. What I can't understand is the evil of people who rape children. I just can't conceive of why you would do that and why you would think that is okay, or how you would ever excuse it or turn a blind eye to it. And I just think there are so many people who need to be held accountable. Let's talk to Stuart in Hertfordshire. He wants to talk about benefits. Stuart, you're very welcome to the programme.
Hi.
Hi there.
Yeah, I was listening earlier, and the talk was all going on around, PIP and the mobility scheme car.
Yes.
And I've sort of got personal experience. So I've always worked, left school at 16, always had at least one job. And then last year, beginning of the year, about April, I was sort of struck down with MS at 35.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Stuart. You got it diagnosed then, which is a good thing, because often it takes a long time.
I started to get a little bit before, but that's when I was sort of diagnosed, and I've gone from, never sort of needing the benefit system, never really needing the NHS, always been quite healthy, to all of a sudden, regular hospital appointments. And because of it, I do have limited mobility, and I do have a mobility scheme car. And so I think the rhetoric around the mobility scheme especially tends to be quite extremist on both sides. Mm-hmm. It's either like, we should, give them to everyone, or there's people sort of, debating who's worthy and who's not, as it were. But there are people out there like me, like I say, I have limited mobility. I need crutches to get around. I can't sort of get more than 150 yards, maybe 200 yards without being out of breath.
So you clearly need help with your situation. There's absolutely no doubt about that, Stuart.
It's a game changer,
What do you think about what the government's proposing?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely fat in the benefit system, and there's definitely people claiming it that necessarily don't need it. But like I say, it's hard. It's one of those things where we, I've been able to maintain my job. I still work full time. So
that's great. As many people with MS do. Yeah. Well, what type do you have? Do you have relapsing remitting, or?
I do have relapsing and remitting. Yeah. So obviously, which is the better one of the two.
Yeah.
But it's just a complicated.
And I think a lot of people. I mean, you're talking about this with great knowledge and in a very articulate way, Stuart. There are so many people, I'm sure, who are very nervous at the moment as well, like you, who are genuinely, have all sorts of issues. I mean, this is something that comes up time and again, and I really do feel for many genuine benefits claimants who think, hold on a second, am I going to continue to get these benefits?
Yeah, it's like so part of the treatment I'm on is like I live in Hertfordshire, and I have to go into Royal London Hospital in central London every 4 weeks for like an infusion.
Yeah.
And so obviously with the mobility scheme car, I have to drive there and back. And the idea that I could, do it on public transport is, is just so far away from reality.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I would consider myself sort of centre-right. I voted for reform in the last local elections. And when I hear them talking about the mobility scheme, it makes me think, there are people out me like there that, do support a
reform,
small state, as it were.
Well, Stuart, I love you. Just as this debate continues in regard to welfare, I'd love you to give me another ring on a future occasion, just when things start to move and we start talking about it a bit more, because I'd love to kind of just check in with you and see how you're getting on, Stuart. My best friend has MS. She also has a similar version of it to yourself, and my aunt has it as well. I had an aunt who's sadly no longer with us who had secondary progressive MS, so it's something I know a little bit about. But I wish you well, Stuart, and your points are very, very well made, and I hope this nervousness that so many people have, at least if there's certainty, then people can move on and find out what they want to do. But Stuart, thanks for your call.
Thanks for taking it.
Okay, good to talk to you. That's Stuart from Hertfordshire there. John in Long Longford says, I don't understand why people text in and say, why not send the illegal migrants to the Falklands? I wonder what our British citizens in the Falklands might think about that. I know I wouldn't be happy, says John. I know exactly what you mean, John, why people of the Falklands have been through enough. Lots more to discuss, including international issues, with our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Reports coming in to us that KLM, the Dutch airline, may be cancelling flights to the Middle East. We'll hear about that from Isabel in just a second and reflect on what Keir Starmer said to me earlier on this afternoon in regard to Iran and Israel.
I trust the government to distribute nothing sensibly. The DWP is just a farce, and I have a fantastic office manager in Great Yarmouth who's fantastic at doing all our casework. We're right on it, and we try and deliver for our constituents. He used to work at the DWP.
So he knows how it works.
He got so frustrated by the sort of indiscriminate handout of taxpayers' money that he had to come and do a more sensible job.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right then. I love it when people ring 0344 499 1000. I love it when you give us the benefit of your views. We get as many people on the air as possible. We'll continue to do that between now and 7. What I don't like, and what I don't want anybody to do, is to be like Ian in Newcastle, who rang up and just abused the producers and said horrible things to them a minute ago, said they should get real jobs. Well, I've got real jobs. They're producers on this show. They provide a really good service. They don't get paid as much as they should, and I'm happy to say that. They're good people, Jodie and Ryan and everybody else behind the scenes as well, Ammon, Chris and Luke and Sam, the tech up as well. They're doing a tough job, they're doing a good job, and if you want to ring in and abuse them, tell you what, ring another number. Ian in Newcastle, if you're easily offended, maybe you're a bit of a snowflake. So don't do that again, please. Ring in, be nice, be reasonable, make your point. I know people are often very strong in their opinions, and that's absolutely fine, but treat people who you're ringing on the phone with respect. Ian, learn that lesson, please. Thank you very much. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott now, who is Talk's international editor. Isabel, great to talk to you, especially with your job title, earning your money today, of course, given that we're possibly on the brink of World War III. What do you make of it all?
Well, it's not a light matter at all, is it? And, you know, it clearly is escalating. I know Keir Starmer today in your brilliant interview with him talked a lot of really, frankly, banal platitudes about de-escalation. It's not happening.
I mean, the very thought that Benjamin Netanyahu and Ayatollah Khomeini are thinking, Hold on a sec. I wonder what Keir Starmer thinks of this. Let's act in that regard, or even Trump. I mean, it's just for the birds, isn't it?
It completely is. So I didn't, we can talk about the other things in your brilliant interview with him, but what he had to say on the international situation, I didn't think was particularly revelatory.
Let's just remind ourselves of what Isabel has called the banal platitudes. This is what Sir Keir Starmer said to me a little bit earlier on. Are you going to back President Trump if he goes to war with Iran?
Well, it's a fast-moving situation in the Middle East, and I share the concern about the nuclear program of Iran. I absolutely clear in my mind that Israel has the right to self-defense. I do think that we need to de-escalate the situation. There's a huge risk now of escalation across the region. I'm talking to regional leaders on a daily basis. They're very concerned about escalation. It could spill very easily into Gaza, which is already an intolerable situation. And obviously it's having an impact on the economy. So I'm clear in all of my discussions, we need to de-escalate this. Yes, deal with that nuclear program, but de-escalate and deal with it, as was the case, in recent weeks with negotiations and an outcome that is a diplomatic outcome.
It ain't going to be de-escalated, is it, Isabel?
I mean, brilliant. Thanks for that incredible insight, Keir Starmer. The fact is that there hasn't been a diplomatic solution with Iran.
It's kind of the point.
Efforts have been made, and there isn't going to be a diplomatic solution, and that's why we are where we are. That is why the US president is saying that he has tried every which way to bring about a diplomatic solution. And in the end, some people only respond to force when it comes to the destruction of their facilities for attempting to create nuclear weapons that could have devastating effects. So look, this is hotting up very definitely. Information has come to me this afternoon that KLM, the Dutch airline, is beginning to cancel flights. This is between Amsterdam and Dubai. I know of flights that are being cancelled as far as ahead as Saturday now, and they are emailing customers and saying this is because of the geopolitical situation. I do have some concerns that will lead to almost copycat from other airlines. So we may see an awful lot of panic in the next few days as people who are in the region work out whether they want to stay in the region, frankly. I mean, it is, I think, quite concerning if a big airline like that is cutting off flights to and from Dubai, of all places. And I'm speaking to you now from central London. But I am aware that an awful lot of people in the region are actually trying to get to Dubai because they consider it to be rightly one of the safest parts of the Middle East to be in. So I am concerned that there is now an indication that a big airline like that is looking at this and saying, is this safe for us to be flying from Europe into the Middle East or out of the Middle East at the moment? At the moment, KLM is not saying this on their website. This has come to me from a passenger who has had their flight cancelled and has been told this is because of the geopolitical situation.
Be fascinating to see what happens and whether other airlines do the same thing. Of course, we've seen and spoken to people in Israel at the moment, but this is affecting a much wider group of people, a much wider number of flights, as you correctly say, Isabel. I just wondered, just on what Starmer was saying there as well on the gangs, whether you have any, I suppose, faith in the fact that this inquiry will get the right outcome and whether there will actually be this problem solved or at least ameliorated?
I am really concerned about how much of this is still going on and how many people with links to the Labour Party are complicit in it. In the last few days, I've been receiving an awful lot of information from sources that want to talk about what they know. And these sources are implicating Labour Party figures at very local levels. So there's a really good reason why Keir Starmer has been so reluctant to go there with this national inquiry, because I think an awful lot of people with Labour Party positions at a local level are caught up in this.
And within that, Isabel, I just wonder whether you think that Louise Casey was kind of used as a political fig leaf, in that he knew he would have to do a national inquiry. That was probably inevitable. But actually say, oh, Louise Casey says you've got to do it, that gave him maybe a bit of political cover in this. Obviously, look, the practicalities, the inquiry itself, the victims, they're at the centre of this. But there's politics too, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely, there's politics. And I would quickly, because I know we haven't got much time, but I do also want to reflect on what he had, or rather what he didn't have to say about the Channel migrants.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought it was very disappointing that he still doesn't get it. He's still talking about smashing the gangs. It's not working. It's not.
I literally said to him, I said, your approach isn't working. What are you going to do? And he just repeated the same stuff.
More of the same. And this is so worrying that he doesn't understand that you've got to actually tackle the demand for the gangs. As long as there's a demand, there will be more gangs. That's just market economics, you know. If there are customers, then there will be businesses to serve them. He doesn't seem to understand that the only way to tackle this is to actually stop the boats coming, or either you turn them around, or you have an instant policy of, if you come here via that route, you will automatically be deported, no ifs or buts. He doesn't seem to get that, and that was very disappointing. And thank you for revealing that, because, you know, I know it's not easy to get interviews with the Prime Minister, and especially not if you're a radio station that holds this government and other politicians to account. You know, we don't make life easy for them, so well done for you for actually getting that access.
That's very kind as well, thank you. And it's often in those interviews what they don't say as well as what they do. Appreciate your thoughts. That's Isabel Oakeshott, our international editor there. Robin Wiltshire, why doesn't he ever give a straight answer to a straight question? It's unbelievably annoying. And Natalie said, I never heard you talk about the human tragedy of the people born on the Chagos Islands. Natalie, if you want to give me a ring about that, we've certainly spoken to people about that previously. 0344 499 1000. We'll get further reflection on Keir Starmer from James Mathieson, former Labour spokesman. He's coming in a minute. Your calls too. Stay with us.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people, because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, hey, look, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I interviewed the Prime Minister earlier on today. We'll be looking at that interview in a minute. It covered all sorts of things, the gangs, the rape gangs. We talked about immigration. We talked about the cost of living and a big announcement today. And of course, Iran. And there are developments at the White House. The White House Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt, is giving a press conference very soon. We may well take a bit of that as well. Apparently, Donald Trump is in the Situation Room. What is going to happen there? That's the place, of course, deep underneath the White House where they make those decisions about going to war. I'm not saying for a second that he is doing that, but we know he is in that room at the moment. Lots to discuss. We'll talk about Keir Starmer with James Mathewson. We'll talk about Iran and of course, Israel with Colonel Simon Diggins as well. We'll get your views on all of this, whether it's the rape gangs, whether it's migration, whether it's disability. Lots to talk about between now and 7 o'clock. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text me, 87222, with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on the main number, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about, as I say, between now and Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, quite a few people have got in touch with me to ask me if the Prime Minister came round to my house. He did not. Or whether I was in the kitchen of number 10 Downing Street. I was not. It was actually a visit. The Prime Minister was on to Staffordshire, a place called, well, actually just outside New Toxeter, and he was visiting someone who will get the Warm Homes Scheme payment, 150 quid, that I asked him about at the end of the interview. But we covered many topics, as I say. This is what the Prime Minister said to me earlier on today. This was his first interview with Talk since becoming Prime Minister. This is what Sir Keir Starmer had to say. You have proven you can act quickly and decisively when you want to. You recalled Parliament, you put through legislation in a day in regard to the Scunthorpe blast furnace. You directed the police and the courts in regard to the rioters last summer. Why not direct the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, which you used to lead today, to prioritise catching gang members who have raped children? Start solving this today instead of waiting for an inquiry.
Great challenge, and that is exactly what we've done.
How much more money have you given?
So the spending review puts more money towards policing, but the instruction is absolutely clear to go after these vile criminals. I've long said, I mean, grooming is an awful crime. I prosecuted the first case best part of 15 years ago. The first time there was a grooming case in our court, I took the decision to prosecute. But I know from talking to victims the impact it has. I've always said the first port of call should be a criminal investigation. Yes, there will now be a national inquiry. There has to be accountability. But for victims and survivors, the most important thing is there's a criminal investigation where there can be, and that where perpetrators are convicted, they then go to prison. And that is by far the best and most important way of dealing with this vile offence.
Do you regret being against an inquiry? You said some of the people calling it were jumping on a right-wing bandwagon. Are you going to apologise for that?
Well, the people I was referring to, and I made this absolutely clear when I said it, were the politicians who had been in power and done absolutely nothing. And then as soon as they're out of power, are screaming and shouting. So Kemi Badenoch, Chris Philp, those individuals, when they were in power, did absolutely nothing. Now, I've been campaigning and working on this for 15 years, and have as many other people. Initially, we were looking at local inquiries, but I asked Louise Casey to just do an audit to assure me there wasn't more that we could do. She's done that. She's written that up. It's a pretty long report. I've read every single word of it. She's recommended a national inquiry. I accept her recommendation. That'll be a statutory inquiry and we'll get on with it. It runs alongside the criminal investigation, by the way. It's very important. It's not one or the other, because the first route should always be the criminal route, in my view, because where we've got perpetrators that are convicted, they should be in prison.
Over 40,000 illegal migrants have arrived in small boats since you've been Prime Minister. It's the worst year on record. Your approach just isn't working, is it?
We're, absolutely serious about the response to what is a serious problem. In the end, the way to deal with this is to bring down the gangs that are running this trade, and it is a trade. They're making huge amounts of money. That's why we are increasing law enforcement powers. There's a bill going through Parliament which will give counter-terrorism powers to our law enforcement. The ability to get in much earlier. We're working with international partners. I raised this in my discussions with the French president when I saw him earlier this week, with the Chancellor in Germany, with the Prime Minister of Italy, because we've got to come down even harder on these gangs. We're determined to do so. I know we've got to do more. That's why I'm working with our partners to do that, particularly in relation to law enforcement in the north of France. And that I raised directly with the French president. We're working together on this. But we are absolutely determined, with the extra powers to our law enforcement, working with our partners, and then importantly, where people do come to the country who aren't entitled to be here, processing their claims and then returning them to where they came from. And since we've been in power, 30,000 people who've no right to be in the United Kingdom have now been removed from the United Kingdom because we're processing the claims. It's the highest number for the best part of 10 years. But I accept the challenge. There's more that we've got to do.
Are you going to back President Trump if he goes to war with Iran?
Well, it's a fast-moving situation in the Middle East. I share the concern about the nuclear program of Iran. I absolutely clear in my mind that Israel has the right to self-defense. I do think that we need to de-escalate the situation. There's a huge risk now of escalation across the region. I'm talking to regional leaders on a daily basis. They're very concerned about escalation. It could spill very easily into Gaza, which is already an intolerable situation. And obviously it's having an impact on the economy. So I'm clear in all of my discussions, we need to de-escalate this. Yes, deal with that nuclear program, but de-escalate and deal with it, as was the case in recent weeks, with negotiations and an outcome that is a diplomatic outcome.
Prime Minister, you say what you're announcing today will help people such as families here in Staffordshire save £150 on their bills, with energy bills some of the highest in the world here in the UK. Is your policy of net zero actually just storing up price rises and energy insecurity for the future?
No, complete opposite. What we've seen is that particularly conflict adds to our energy prices. So energy prices have gone up. They're 40% higher than they were at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The reason they've gone up is because we're on the international market, the fossil fuel market, and therefore we're impacted by the actions of others in conflict. So the long-term aim here and intention is go to renewables, which are cheaper. We have control over them, security, and therefore we're not affected when there's international conflict. But in the meantime, what I recognise and what today is all about is that this winter, next winter, people need help with their bills. And that's why we're rolling out now for nearly 6 million households, so many more people, but 6 million households, £150 off your energy bill this winter. And we're in Nicola's kitchen here. She's training to be a teaching assistant. She's working hard. She's on UC, but having £150 towards her energy bill, she tells me, will make the big difference to her, really get her through the winter for the energy bill. She's got 3 young children. That's not an untypical case. So I'm really pleased that we can make that announcement today. And for many, many families, when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of money and we struggled to pay our bills. I actually know what it feels like to fear the postman coming with a bill. Nicola, equally now, not the postman, but she's got a smart meter. She knows this is going to make a material difference to her. And politics is about who do you have in your mind's eye when you make decisions. And it's hardworking people like Nicola who will be helped by this £150 off your bill this winter.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for speaking to Talk.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who has responded to that, including people who've been critical as well. We disagree without being disagreeable on my shows, and there certainly are a number of people who aren't happy with that interview. Pathetic interview, says Paul North. Peter allowed him to ramble on and spout his usual soundbite lies without a word of challenge. Well, if you actually watched the interview, I challenged him a couple of times, perhaps more gently than I would have liked, perhaps more gently than maybe other presenters would have done. But the fact is, I had about 7 minutes. I wanted to get through a number of topics. I think I had 5 questions actually by the time we got to the end of that. I wanted to cover a number of topics. If I just interrupted him over and over again, if I just challenged him on every single thing that he said, well, we wouldn't have got very far because we didn't have very much time. The beauty of this station, more so I would argue actually than any other station that's out there, is that we do have time. We are able to talk to people. We're able to rip up a running order and change things and react to stories in a way that perhaps other stations don't. what Keir Starmer said there, maybe there wasn't a huge amount that was new, but he spoke to us. It took a while to get that interview, but also I think we needed to hear from him, because certainly we perhaps don't hear from Labour enough. I try to have as many Labour, Lib Dem people on, and I think often people reveal themselves by what they say, and some of the most intelligent comments that I've seen some a number of intelligent comments, including intelligent comments challenging me and saying, you know, why didn't you push him harder, that's fine. But actually, when you let people speak, sometimes they just reveal themselves a bit. And I don't think there's anybody in any doubt of their opinion of Keir Starmer after seeing that interview. I haven't come across someone saying, well, I don't really know what I think. Anyway, let's speak to James Mathieson, who's a former Labour spokesman. James, you're very welcome to the programme. What did you think of what Keir Starmer had to say?
Well, firstly, Peter, I've got to speak in your defence, which you might need to. I'm pleased you're sitting down already for it, but I think, honestly, you did a fantastic job with that interview. I just got off the phone from a backbench Labour MP, rushing back to my house here so I could come and chat to you. And I said to him before I went, I'm going on with Peter Cardwell. And Tony went, why is everyone talking to Peter Cardwell all of a sudden? what's the deal? I said, well, what did you think? He thought, oh, it was good. But obviously the senior kind of Labour advisors and all the rest of it who kind of stress about these interviews, would be concerned about doing an interview like that. It was very intimate and it seemed very close. But I think you did a fantastic job.
Thank you. Well, I hope I did challenge him, and some people say I didn't challenge him, but certainly, I came back on a couple of the answers. Also, I mean, it's not about me, it's about what the Prime Minister said and people's reaction to it. And I just wonder, in regard to particularly the thing I asked him a couple of questions on, I did challenge him on the rape gangs as well. I mean, do you have are you really sure, do you think that we will get the solutions we need in regard to the victims, in regard to protecting many politicians, including Labour politicians, particularly on a local level, who clearly covered some of this up, James?
I would hope so, I really do. And look, say what you like about Keir Starmer, and I know people have their different opinions, and I know sometimes those opinions can go into the space of conspiracy theory and all the rest of it, and there's all sorts of theories online that float about people in power, isn't there? But what I've seen from Keir Starmer consistently throughout his career is that I don't think he's particularly loyal to anyone in that sense, in a party or tribal way. I would say if there's anybody who's going to be calling shots on an investigation like this, similar from his background, that's what he did as a prosecutor. I don't think he has any connection or any concerns about the kind of depth of that and how far it goes. I think everything that should be uncovered will be uncovered, and rightly so.
Let's hope so. The biggest issue that we're dealing with, of course, as a nation at the moment is internationally, is, of course, what on earth Donald Trump is going to do about Iran. Caroline Levitt, who is his press secretary, is giving a press conference very soon. We'll perhaps dip into that a little bit later on in the programme to see what she is saying. We know Trump is in the Situation Room at the moment. What do you think Keir Starmer should do? Because I wasn't happy with what he was saying to me. If I'd had more time, I would have pressed him more on that, in terms of, he keeps saying de-escalate, de-escalate, but that's not going to happen. We've got to deal with the situation that's in front of us, don't we?
We do. I think it's about securing British assets in the region and making sure that, first and foremost, the Prime Minister of this country should be looking out for those people who are, British people, citizens, overseas staff, embassy staff all around the region, and making sure they're secure. What Isabel Oakeshott was just saying before there about, Dubai being kind of an area of concern for people's absolutely mind-blowing. But obviously anybody connected to the area, anybody within a reasonable distance of that area will be concerned and will be worried. So he needs to, yes, I understand the de-escalate conversation. I don't think you can, even as the Prime Minister of the UK, which is a respected position in the world stage, I don't think you can have Donald Trump's ear on this. I think Netanyahu and Trump will do what they want. And I think they've probably already decided what they're going to do. They're just deciding how they're going to do it. So we'll see that play out. But the UK, and I cannot stress this enough from a Labour Party point of view, the Labour Party's long history that hangs over it of the Iraq War and our involvement in that, and Tony Blair's relationship with George W. Bush, we must not be pulled into an international conflict led by America. We must not, because that, simply there is no reason for us to. We can support our allies, we can do our bit from here, but already Israel, should be on thin ice, really, when it comes to the world stage and alliances, because of their behaviour in Gaza and what they've done.
But the problem, what's the behaviour in Gaza that you object to?
Genocide, Peter. Which
It's not genocide. It's not. Oh, James, no. It's not genocide. It is. They've given 2.3 million meals to Gazans in the last week.
I'm sorry. I disagree with you. We're not going.
Well, they have factually. They have. They're giving aid to Gazans.
They are, but that doesn't mean there isn't a genocide underway. There's a genocide underway in Gaza, Peter.
There's a genocide underway in Sudan, and lots of people don't care about it, and they don't go on the streets.
Myanmar and in China with the Uyghurs.
Yeah, where are those people on the streets? They're on the streets because they hate Israel, because they hate Jews.
I can't answer for people on the streets, Peter. I'm just saying that when I look to Gaza, I see a genocide.
Okay, it's factually not a genocide, but James, we can talk about it more on another occasion. That's James Mathewson there from former Labour spokesman. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thanks to everybody else who's been in touch as well, including Ellie in Gosport, who says, doing a great show as usual. I'm just wondering why the people keep suggesting sending illegals to the Falklands. The people there don't want them. They had some illegals there in 1982. They had to be booted out by the British forces. Yes, we all are familiar with that, of course, and they did a great job. If we're going to send them anywhere, it should be a cold, wet, deserted island somewhere. Keep up the good work, says Ellie in Gosport. Leslie says, I know a couple both unemployed with a child with ADHD, so qualified for a mobility car for the child, then demanded to get a taxi to ferry the child to and from school. Steve said, I watched the Starmer interview and must admit I felt a bit sorry for him. He's out of his depth. From Southend-on-Sea, Tristan has been in touch and says, hello Peter and the great staff at Talk. I've been in the studio a couple of times and on air. The staff on and off screen are incredibly helpful and kind, and being blind, I could never have had my past and future appearances without you all. You're the friendliest in British broadcasting, and I hope you get the respect you rightly deserve. Tristan, what a lovely thing to say. I was talking about earlier on about a clown called Ian in Newcastle who rang up to abuse our wonderful producers, both Jodie and Ryan, and they were perfectly respectful, as they always are. But Tristan standing up for the people behind the scenes who make the show. It's not just me, it's not just us sitting here. There's a whole team of people behind the scenes. And I must talk about Chris Jacobs as well, who's an absolute legend, who was very, very helpful today with that Starmer interview. Rich in South Derbyshire, wasn't too far from you today. In fact, it was in Derby, Rich. Changed trains there. Evening, Peter. Despite the Prime Minister's consistent gaslighting and stream of prescriptive responses, I thought you were a consummate professional. The social contract is broken, says Rich, and this government is driving us to a cliff edge. Isn't time to have a meaningful and constructive conversation on which mechanisms, if any, exist to push for a general election? Loads of people want that. I just don't think you're going to get it before 2029. We will see what happens. Lots to discuss. We'll take some of your calls in just a minute here on Talk. If you want to get your voice on the air between now and 7, it's 0344 499 1000.
United States is...
Her mum took her to a GP. Her GP sent her straight up to Blackburn Hospital and rang Blackburn Hospital. They put her straight on the other ICU unit and put her in an induced coma, and then every time I rung up, you know, she seemed to be like no better. She'd just come off one about 2 weeks early, so you were expecting the same, you know, that eventually she'll come round. And they said, "Oh, we're reducing her sedation," and I'm thinking, "Oh, they're bringing her round," because I don't know whether you know or not, they bring them round very, very slowly, because they bring them round too fast, it does a lot of damage.
Absolutely.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Caroline Levitt, who is the press secretary at the White House, will be giving a press conference very, very soon. We'll perhaps take a little bit of that because we think, or I think we're told, I think it's confirmed, that Donald Trump is in the Situation Room. We don't know why, but certainly things are moving apace. Simon Diggins, Colonel Simon Diggins, is a military and defence analyst. Simon, you've had a long day just like me. I heard you on a rival station at about 10 to 7 this morning. Of course, it has been a dramatic and fast-moving day. Where are we now at 23 minutes past 6, do you think?
Peter, good evening to you. I think we're still in a slight waiting game at the moment as to what's going to happen. All day we know that the US have been bringing forces into the region to ramp up pressure on the Iranians and perhaps put across the Iranians how serious the situation is. Donald Trump has up to now also been sitting on the fence, saying that he has not yet decided whether to attack Iran or not attack Iran. But he's also said that they have approved the plans. In other words, if he does make the decision to go, then the US military know what they need to do and when they need to go and do it. So that bit is clear. He has a dilemma, though, because it's not only the dilemma of widening this war, but also what the effect of this might well be on his own domestic support base, many of whom are very much opposed to the idea of what they would call another forever war in the Middle East.
And certainly in regard to the decisions that Donald Trump is making, we obviously don't know and can't know and probably won't know for a generation the conversations that are going on in this Situation Room at the moment. What do you imagine, what is most likely is being presented to the president, do you think?
I think two things. One is what the likely success rate otherwise would be of the military options. If he goes down the military option route, presumably that would be to attack some of the bases that the Israelis can't hit properly with their own forces, what the likely success rate of that will be, and then the follow-on consequences. What are the likely fallout from that, both in terms of the conflict, but also potentially what effect they might have on the Iranian regime itself. There is also ambivalence about what that future is going to hold. Israeli commentators, the Prime Minister, Netanyahu and others have not been very clear themselves whether their intention is simply to defang Iran from its nuclear ambitions, or whether it's actually to seek regime change proper in Tehran. I think they'd actually like regime change in Tehran, and they're not. But that's a big bold move.
And certainly when it comes to the UK, what pressure is Starmer under? I interviewed him earlier today. In fact, can we just look at this clip from the interview a little bit earlier? I did press him, or at least attempted to. He seems to keep talking about de-escalation, but of course the time, in my view, for that, it would be great if it happened, but it's unlikely. Let's just remind ourselves about what the Prime Minister said to me on this specific issue a bit earlier on today. Are you going to back President Trump if he goes to war with Iran?
Well, it's a fast-moving situation in the Middle East, and I share the concern about the nuclear program of Iran. I absolutely clear in my mind that Israel has the right to self-defense. I do think that we need to de-escalate the situation. There's a huge risk now of escalation across the region. I'm talking to regional leaders on a daily basis. They're very concerned about escalation. It could spill very easily into Gaza, which is already an intolerable situation. And obviously it's having an impact on the economy. So I'm clear in all of my discussions, we need to de-escalate this. Yes, deal with that nuclear program, but de-escalate and deal with it, as was the case in recent weeks, with negotiations and an outcome that is a diplomatic outcome.
What do you make of that? It sounded to me, as I was listening to it, and as I listen to it again now, Simon, almost more like analysis than actually someone who's involved with this. I wonder what you think.
Yeah, I just don't understand it. I mean, because there's nothing to de-escalate at the moment.
Yeah.
The moment you have essentially what Prime Minister Netanyahu has determined is that Israel faces an existential threat. When they got the information from the International Atomic Energy Authority that Iran had now got the capacity to create up to 9 nuclear bombs, then that line which we've been looking for the whole time about whether Iran can move from a sort of theoretical capability into an actual one, I think have been crossed. I mean, Israel has been really clear for years, as have we all, that it's unacceptable for Iran, the sponsor of terrorism throughout the Middle East, the killer of 136 British soldiers in the Iraq War, to have nuclear weapons. And it looked like they're getting very close to it. We don't have to have some inspectors on the ground go, oh, look, it's a nuclear weapon. At some point, you have to make an intelligence analysis and say they're getting so close, you can't afford to leave it any longer. So I'm afraid, I think our Prime Minister is missing the point entirely, which is why, of course, Britain has been completely sidelined and no one's really listened to it.
I just want to go, Simon, thank you. We'll leave it there and we'll go to Caroline Levitt now, who is the spokeswoman at the White House. This is what she's saying right now.
117,000 illegal aliens. And this particular statistic is absolutely astounding. In the month of May, under the Trump administration, 0 illegal aliens were released into our country by Border Patrol. Let me say that again. Not a single illegal alien was released into the interior of the United States of America last month under this administration. Let's contrast that to Joe Biden's failed leadership, where immigration officers were wasting their finite time and resources processing dangerous illegal aliens for release into the United States. President Trump immediately terminated that reckless Biden-era practice that undermined the rule of law, jeopardized public safety and our national security.
So that's Caroline Levitt there, the White House press secretary. She's talking about immigration. We expected her to talk about Iran. Of course, immigration, very, very interesting, and Donald Trump clearly making some major inroads in that. I'm sure Keir Starmer has a lot to learn from him. We're going to take a break now. When she starts talking about Iran, we're going to go back to Caroline Levitt at the White House, but let's just have a quick break now. We'll go live to Israel as well. Lots more to discuss on all these issues, whether it's disability, immigration, rape gangs, Iran, Israel, Starmer interview, benefits, whatever you want to talk about. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. And Louise Casey should lead the national inquiry, says Kev, with Maggie Oliver as her deputy. But immediately, local police and Crown Prosecution Service actions are needed now, as Jim, the former senior cop, that was Jim Gamble, who was talking to us earlier, stated. Plus, no hiding behind the sub judice garbage to stop convictions occurring, while Baroness Casey and Maggie get on board with exposing all and sundry. That's Kevin in Stafford. Thanks for that. John in Rugby says a crooked man like Starmer cannot give a straight answer, even if his life depended on it. Well, Caroline Levitt is the White House Press Secretary. She's talking at the moment about immigration in the White House. We are, of course, interested in that, always interested in that topic here at Talk, but what we're particularly interested in is Iran and Israel, because what on earth is going to happen? How are things going to develop? Apparently, President Trump in the Situation Room as we speak. One person who that will certainly affect is my friend Lee Scott. He is a former Conservative MP, used to work with Lee. He's a great guy, and he's in Israel at the moment. What I've been doing on all my different shows over the past week or so is checking in on him. He's stuck there at the moment with his family who live there, grandkids there. Lee, how are things with you now, and how have things developed?
Good evening, Peter. Today has been horrendous, my friend. It's just been totally horrendous. I'll give you a brief outline. We ventured out, because we had to, this morning, and got caught in the attack, which was on both Beersheba, Tel Aviv. We had to shelter under a motorway bridge because we were in a car at the time.
And you're just outside Tel Aviv, aren't you?
Yeah, we're just outside Tel Aviv. I got thrown against the concrete wall and have injured my arm, but I'm okay. There was shrapnel falling all around us. The missiles were going off in the air. It's just been an absolutely horrendous day, and I'm going to send a message, if I can, through you, to our Foreign Secretary. Why is it that every other country is getting their residents out?
Yeah.
And we are recommending people go across the border to Egypt or Jordan. I don't know if our Foreign Secretary realises that Jewish people coming from Israel aren't that popular in Jordan or Egypt.
Yeah. Lee, I'm really concerned to hear about, let's get to that in a second, but I'm really concerned to hear about your injury. Are you sure you're okay? Have you had medical attention?
Yeah, I'm bandaged up, but it's just swollen. It's nothing. Maybe I may have chipped the bones, but I'm okay. I'll be fine. There's people here in a lot worse situations than I am. We're all getting, I'm going to be honest with you, very, very edgy. You've known me a long while. I'm a pretty jovial person, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday I cried my eyes out.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Lee. And you've been in those shelters as well overnight. You must be exhausted.
We are exhausted. We haven't had a proper night's sleep in 7 days. I say again, this isn't about the Iranian people. This is about the fact that we're all human beings. And this just is no way to live. It's got to stop. President Trump hopefully will make his mind up one way or another what he's going to do and do it. But for the people on the ground here, it's horrendous now.
And tell me, we were talking about the Foreign Office, about the fact that so many other nations, Germany and others, have extracted people. We can see, if you're watching on the screen, a picture of Lee there. He's standing up in this sort of pinky purple top with a lot of his family around him in the shelters there underneath the ground in Israel. This was a few days ago. And Lee, the Foreign Office, have you been in touch with them? What are they actually telling you?
They're recommending that there's land borders open to Egypt and Jordan, which you can cross through. Now, I don't know what's true and what's not true, but I've had some pretty horror stories from people who tried to do that. I'm not saying what is correct or what isn't, but that isn't something that I will be doing. We have ships, we have bases just across in Cyprus. Send the ships across and get us.
Yeah.
I obviously, as you can gather, am very, very down, for want of a better word, at the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the reasons are. I genuinely don't understand what David Lammy is waiting for, or what we're waiting for. I want to pay tribute to some of his colleagues. Wes Streeting has been very helpful. He was the person, as you know, who took my parliamentary seat.
Yeah, you were the MP in that constituency, and Wes Streeting has actually been helping you.
Yeah, we've been in regular contact with Wes. I've been in contact with Priti Patel, Kemi Badnoch, who have both been amazing help, and Neil Hudson. They're all trying and saying, get people out. It's not about me as an individual.
Well, let me tell you what the Foreign Office has told us and get your reaction to it, Lee. The safety and security of British nationals is our top priority. The Foreign Office is working around the clock to respond to the crisis and support British nationals affected. We recognise this as a fast-moving situation that has the potential to deteriorate further quickly and without warning. That is why we are encouraging British nationals to register their presence and pay close attention to travel advice.
Yeah, we've registered our presence. Haven't heard a word from them. Had some texts and emails telling me next to nothing, but that's it. We've registered our presence straight away and told them we're here and we want to get back home. But we haven't heard a word.
Lee, just hold that thought. We've got to go to Caroline Levitt now in the White House. Let's hear what she has to say about Iran.
The president has repeated that in his first term as president and his second term as president as well. That's why he was adamantly opposed to the disastrous Iranian nuclear agreement that was implemented by President Obama. And it's why he has given great latitude and given a lot of effort to achieving a diplomatic solution. But he's been very clear. Iran went for 60 days when he gave them that 60-day warning without coming to the table. On day 61, Israel took action against Iran. And as I just told you from the president directly, he will make a decision within 2 weeks.
A follow-up?
Sure. Go ahead, Natalie.
Thanks, Caroline. Can you confirm whether Steve Witkoff has been in touch with the Iranian foreign minister? And does Witkoff plan to go to Geneva tomorrow for talks?
I am not tracking that on Mr. Witkoff's travel schedule, but I can certainly check in with him to be sure. As for correspondence between the United States and the Iranians, I can confirm that correspondence has continued. As you know, we were engaged with 6 rounds of negotiations with them in both indirect and direct ways.
Thanks, Kelly. Just to clarify the president's statement just now, when he says that he'll make a decision in the next 2 weeks, is he saying that if Iran does not come back to the negotiating table within the next 2 weeks, that the president will strike?
The president is saying that he will make a decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks. It's very clear and direct.
And is he seeing any signs of progress? He obviously is holding out hope for negotiations, but is he seeing any inklings of progress that give him that hope that talks are still possible?
Well, that's why he said in the statement that I just read for all of you, based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, he will make that decision within the next 2 weeks.
What makes him think there's still a substantial chance, is my question.
I'm not going to get into the reasoning and the rationale the president believes that, but that's his position, and he will make a decision within the next 2 weeks.
Caroline.
Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. President Trump has said previously in regard to Russia, he's used this phrase about 2 weeks several times in terms of like, we expect like a 2-week deadline and then you give another 2-week deadline. How can we be sure that he's going to stick to this one on making a decision on Iran?
Well, in those deadlines, as you've seen in respect to Russia, Ukraine, might I add, these are 2 very different, complicated global conflicts, as you know, that the president inherited from our previous incompetent president in the weakness of the previous administration. And the president has spent a tremendous amount of time and effort cleaning up these crises that were caused by the last administration's just complete dereliction of duty on the world stage and American weakness. Now we have American strength again. With respect to Russia and Ukraine, because of that American strength and the president's leadership, we have seen these 2 sides engage in direct negotiations. And the last time the president said 2 weeks, you saw Russia and Ukraine have direct negotiations for the first time in years. And so the president is always interested in a diplomatic solution to the problems and the global conflicts in this world. Again, he is a peacemaker in chief. He is the peace through strength president. And so if there's a chance for diplomacy, the president's always going to grab it. But he's not afraid to use strength as well, I will add. Francesca.
Thanks, Caroline. What exactly would a deal with Iran need to entail?
No enrichment of a uranium, and it would absolutely not, Iran is not absolutely not able to achieve a nuclear weapon. The president has been very clear about that. And by the way, the deal that Special Envoy Witkoff proposed to the Iranians was both realistic and acceptable within its terms. And that's why the president is sent that deal to them.
To follow up on what you told Natalie, are the talks that the United States is currently having with Iran direct, or are those through intermediaries? And if so, which countries are acting as the intermediary right now?
Out of respect for the ongoing discussions and negotiations, I am not going to get into the details of them. We've provided you confirmation for now. Go ahead. Sure, and then behind you too.
Thanks. Sorry. On the topic of negotiations and talks, does the president have any hopes or specific expectations for the talks tomorrow between European foreign secretaries and their Iranian counterpart?
Well, certainly the entire world is on the president's side when it comes to the fact that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. This is something that pretty much all of humanity, except for the Iranian terrorist regime themselves, agree upon. And so the president expects that Europe will deliver that message directly to the Iranians.
Why does President Trump believe that this 90-day extension on TikTok will provide more runway, perhaps, than the previous extensions that haven't led to a divestment deal?
Because it's more time to make a good deal. Simple question. Dasha?
Thank you so much. I know things are going day by day right now. The president wants maximum optionality. Is the possibility of the U.S. getting involved in a regime change in Iran at all on the table at this point? And then I have one on
Sure. The president's top priority right now is ensuring that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon and providing peace and stability in the Middle East.
And on Medicaid, Caroline, the Senate put forward Medicaid provisions.
We're just going to leave it there. Caroline Leavitt there, the White House press secretary, being asked about Iran. She seems to be asked questions by the White House press corps now about health matters as well. So we're going to leave it there. Certainly that is very interesting to hear that Donald Trump, the President of the United States, due to make a decision within 2 weeks, essentially a deadline in regard to Iran. He knows, and we were hearing from Caroline Leavitt there about Iran's nuclear capabilities, or indeed lack of. It'll be fascinating to see what happens, but we're in this sort of holding pattern, really, in regard to all of that. We previously heard from Lee Scott. We're actually going to check in again with Lee Scott tomorrow, and Zach from earlier, who we spoke to, the local councillor who is stranded in Israel. What on earth is the government up to here? So we've got loads of different nations that are collecting people, that are sending these flights, these repatriation flights, that are sending cruise ships and other ways to get their nationals out of Israel. It's clearly a very, very dangerous place at the moment for foreign nationals who've been there at various points. For things, I mean, Lee has been over for his grandson's bar mitzvah, for example. Zach was over for a wedding. Perfectly legitimate reasons to go to see family and so on in Israel. Why is the government not dealing with this? Surely that's the point of the Foreign Office. We're going to keep pressing this issue because there are thousands of people in Israel at the moment who should be back safely in the UK, and the government seems to have abandoned them. We'll talk about that more tomorrow on the show as well. We'll check in, as I say, with Zach and with Lee. We'll see if we can get some more reaction from the government on all of that as well. Thanks to Adrian and Horsham, who says, just a really quick message to say, I cannot abide Starmer. He is a lying man. Every time he opens his mouth, it's more lies and gaslighting. Worst of all, he is a coward. What a waste of space. That wasn't an interview. You gave him the questions. I did not give him the questions. He did not know the questions beforehand. I would never do that in an interview. That is not something I've ever done in 20 years as a professional journalist, and I'm not going to start now. Leslie says, be truthful as usual, but did you think Starmer waffled? Yes, is the answer. Michael says your interview was telling precisely because you didn't interrupt the Prime Minister. Great work, says Michael. And Rachel says, after watching it, I really want to like Starmer, but I just don't believe a word that comes out of his mouth. Jane says, what you were with Starmer was respectful. Dorothy in East Kilbride says, good evening, Peter. What is Starmer talking about? Just how can things in the Middle East de-escalate and at the same time deal with the nuclear threat? Sitting on the fence as usual. Great show. That's Dorothy in East Kilbride. We'll take more of your messages. We'll also have a quick word with Kevin O'Sullivan. He, of course, is here between 7 and 10. I will be back with Drive tomorrow between 4 and 7, but plenty more discussion to be had in the next 16 minutes before Kev comes on after the news at 7. Stay with us.
They've come into university thinking that the most appropriate way to deal with people that they disagree with is to silence their views, and this attitudes of students is really quite shocking. They think that they have the right to not encounter anything that they find offensive or unsettling, which is great, which is why it is great that Arif Ahmed has proposed that
Arif Ahmed, he's the head of the Office for Students,
who has proposed that they have these sort of inductions to practice being shocked by opinions.
Terrifying?
It is.
Across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talked a bit earlier there about Ian in Newcastle, who was horrible to our producers. Producers are great people, as I was saying there earlier. Even Jodie has become my drug dealer today. Panadol, got a bit of a headache, so thank you to her for that. Lots to discuss, including what the government is doing on welfare. Let's speak to Peter in Dorset. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, good evening to you.
Hi.
Hello?
Hi, yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah. It shows how unfair this government is. It doesn't. I can't really hear you.
I'm just silently listening to you, Peter. So just you keep talking, and we're listening to you. So make your point.
Okay. The government are unbelievably unfair. It doesn't really matter what colour your skin is, or whether you hate this country or you love this country. The fact is, if you're disabled, you're disabled. And how they can discriminate against people who are...
Peter, you there? Hello?
Yeah. Hi.
How they can discriminate against people who are... What were you going to say?
How they can discriminate against people who are disabled is extraordinary. Just for people who don't know out there, or haven't got any association with people who are disabled, the fact is that if, for example, people have a car through their PIPs, if they're having through their PIPs, then sorry, there's a whole echo. I can't.
Okay, I think we're just going to have to leave it there, Peter. Unfortunately, but we'll hopefully get you on again soon. I think you maybe made at least some of your point there. Grace is in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. I think it's the Middle East you want to talk about, Grace.
Yeah, tangentially. I mean, if I lose PIP, then I will be really, really frustrated. But I'm much more concerned about. Rather than about myself losing PIP, I'm more concerned about, not that people shouldn't be concerned about that, but I'm particularly concerned about how the government has cut aid to some of the people in the very greatest need. And you earlier mentioned Sudan.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why there are so many people who talk endlessly about Gaza, but never about what is actually the biggest crisis right now, which is Sudan. In terms of the numbers of people, the biggest crisis in our world right now is Sudan, but there are also crises.
Can I offer an opinion as to why that is?
I know what you're going to say, but go on. Yeah.
Well, two reasons. One, they don't care about Sudan. Two, they don't even care about Muslims. They don't care about Saudi Arabia. They don't care about Syria, for example, and what Assad did there. They don't care about what the Houthis are doing. What they care about is Israel doing things. Whatever Israel does is always wrong, and that's why the Palestine Solidarity Committee, as the 7th of October was occurring, as those attacks were happening, was organising and petitioning the Metropolitan Police to have a permit to have one of these marches. That's what they do. Israel can never do anything right as far as these people are concerned, and whatever Israel does, it's always wrong. They don't care about the humanitarian situation. They don't care about the humanitarian situation in Sudan, for example. It's just, it's hypocritical. It is disgusting. And there is a lot to care about in the Middle East. There's a lot to care about, and we should care about the Gaza humanitarian situation, but we should care about Sudan as well, Grace.
Exactly. And I keep asking people who are obsessively going on about Gaza why they don't also talk about people in Sudan and other places where there is starvation, because we can make a real impact if you donate a certain amount, then it goes far further in terms of what it can buy for starving people than it could if you spent it here. So I find that really exciting. So I'm saying to people, instead of just moaning about Israel, why don't we do something positive and think about how we could actually help people? But all they want to talk about is how much they hate not just Israel, but also our politicians. They're really angry with our politicians for not being opposed to Israel enough. It feels like it's motivated by this tribal resentment more than it is about humanitarian needs.
You're absolutely right, Grace. There is a huge hypocrisy there. The Uyghur Muslims, for example, in Burma, or Myanmar as is its legal name, is a huge issue. The Chinese treatment of Muslims is a huge issue. There are many humanitarian issues on which people could be coming out on the streets of London and right across the nation every single week if they truly cared about the humanitarian situation. Instead, it's patting themselves on the back and saying, "Isn't Israel dreadful?"
Yeah, and honestly, this might sound weird to people, but I think that the concept of subconscious racial bias exists. I think our brains are programmed to some extent to prefer people who look like ourselves, and we need to work on that, because we need to recognise that people are equally valuable even if they don't look like ourselves. But I wonder sometimes if the way that some people who go on about Gaza endlessly but never about people in Sudan or Congo or Nigeria, who have some of them been killed for being Christians, for example, I wonder if part of the reason that they don't talk about those people is because some of these lefties going on about Gaza actually have subconscious racial bias against people in Africa.
I wonder if they have it against white people as well. I mean, there are just so many. We could talk about the psychology of this for a very, very long time. Grace, you make some really good points, and I appreciate that. Why didn't you ask Starmer about the evacuation of nationals? Very good point. If I had more time, I would have. I didn't realise it was such a big... I'd be brutally honest with you. I hope I'm usually honest with you, or always honest with you on this station. If you ask me a direct question, I hope I will answer it. I didn't realise it was that big an issue. I really didn't. I knew it was kind of an issue. I knew it was a bit of an issue. I didn't realise just how astonishingly bad it was until today, when I came back from the train, started reading all the different material that the producers gave me about this programme, and realised just how bad it was. Now I realise it's a big issue. I've got angry about it, and we're going to do more work on it and try to hold the government to account. So had I known before the interview, I would have asked the question. But yeah, maybe I failed on that one. Another person says, "I think you're great and I enjoy listening to you. However, I feel you should have taken a much firmer line of questioning with Starmer. The way he is allowed to spout generic waffle and totally avoid the crux of every question is infuriating." Stephen says, "Not since the days of CJ in the West Wing have we seen such an intelligent and articulate press secretary as Caroline," says Stephen Millings in Belfast. I think Caroline Levitt is brilliant. I mean, she's 27, she's got a 6-month-old, 7-month-old baby, and not that that matters, but she's a mother, she's got a young baby, and she's just, I've never seen her rattled, I've never seen her get a question she didn't know the answer to or couldn't answer. She is a class act, and I agree with you, and I know that Stephen is recovering from illness at the moment, and I wish you well, and I know that you've mentioned CJ in the West Wing because you're watching all the West Wing again, which I highly recommend everyone does because it's a brilliant series. Dorothy in East Kilbride says, "What is Starmer talking about? Just how can things in the Middle East de-escalate at the same time dealing with a nuclear threat?" Let's talk to Mark in Lincolnshire. 0344 499 1000 is the number Mark has rung. Mark, what's on your mind this evening?
Hi there, Peter.
Hiya.
Great show. Enjoyed the interview, by the way.
Thanks.
No problem, man. Yeah, the Israel-Iran thing. It's no time really for de-escalation with this. You know, we've been putting this off.
It's not going to de-escalate anytime soon, Mark, is it?
Well, it isn't, and it shouldn't do, really. Because the problem needs dealing with, Peter. We can't just keep sticking our head in the sand. I mean, at what point will the West have had enough and actually go in and sort this issue out with the Islamic regime?
Should they, do you think? What should they do?
Well, what I do know we shouldn't do is wait until they nuke somewhere.
Yeah.
That's what I know we shouldn't do. You know, and given the fact we have independent evidence, you know, from the Atomic Agency, that they've got enough military-grade uranium to make 9 nukes, I think that's a pretty good enough reason to actually just take them out and get rid of that regime now.
And that's part of what Israel has tried to do. What should Britain do? What should Starmer do?
Support Israel as much as they can. I mean, it's obviously not something we're going to be able to have that much capability in these days, given the way our armed forces have been depleted over the years.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got to take that support role. I mean, obviously, Israel really probably looking for the Americans to get involved, and I think they probably will eventually.
Okay.
Because you can't rationalise with people like the Ayatollah.
Well, you're right, and actually, you know, they have murderous intent and they hate the West. Mark, thank you for your thoughts. Mark in Lincolnshire there. Ian in Newport in South Wales. Ian, you're on the air. What would you like to say?
Oh, hello, Peter. Great show, mate.
Thank you.
It's about the Pakistani rape gangs.
Yes.
Now, I believe it's really cultural, and I'll explain why. I knew a girl she was about 24, 25, had a Pakistani boyfriend, and they went to Pakistani about 5 years ago. And she was constantly being inappropriately touched up all the time.
In Pakistan?
In Pakistan, on the buses, everywhere. Mm-hmm. And there was another instance where it was on the television. There was a guy, a rape gang bloke, who was getting sentenced, Pakistani. And as he was getting sentenced, his daughter from the gallery was shouting, "I love you, Daddy. I love you, Daddy." This is cultural. Now, there's also, I believe, that the Prophet Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl and consummated the marriage at 9 years old. So it's in their culture.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's certainly not every Muslim, Ian.
No.
But listen, there is a respect issue. There is a very, very clear issue, and there are very straightforward British values that, and just moral values, very straightforward values about how you should treat members of the opposite sex or the same sex if you're attracted to them. It's a very, very straightforward issue, isn't it? I mean, yeah, Ian, thank you for your thoughts on that. Gilly is in Manchester. Gilly, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. Every single topic that you're talking about today, it's a brilliant show. But I called up because I was listening to the interview with our wonderful, esteemed Prime Minister.
Yes, I sense a note of sarcasm in your voice.
Yeah. So angry. I don't even know what to do with myself. I am so sick and tired of these politicians coming on and only caring about the working people, and how they define working people is the people that work up to 16 hours a day so they can still claim as many benefits.
16 hours a week, yeah. And Gilly, it's a big, big issue, isn't it? And certainly one that will be a major, major thing that the government is dealing with. Gilly, we've just got to leave it there, I'm afraid, because Kevin O'Sullivan just come into the studio and his show is on after 7. But Gilly, thanks for your thoughts. Maybe we can have a longer conversation on another occasion. Do feel free to give me a ring on another occasion. But listen, thank you for that. Thanks to everybody else. We haven't just had time to get to all the calls today. There have been an awful lot of them. But let's talk to Kevin now. Kevin, what's going on?
You're still hanging around with people like me, are you? You're just knocking around with the real movers and shakers, the Prime Minister, that kind of thing. Very good interview. I love the setting. I said to
random, totally random.
What are they doing in that kitchen? But it kind of works. It kind of works.
Well, the best one was a friend of mine who noticed the